Welcome everybody to Hot Program. I am your host with the most from the East Coast, and I am joined by a man who has dined in the houses of American royalty. I am talking about the Pizza King. I am talking about the Burger King. And I am talking about the Dairy Queen,
That's right.
a man who needs no introduction, folks. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm excellent. Thank you so much. I'm well rested. I didn't sleep worth a nickel Friday to Saturday, but Saturday, Sunday, I slept quite well.
All right, that makes one of us who is well rested, which is better than zero. See, we can do that. We can do that math, folks. I want to jump right into the program. Quick reminder: we do this every Sunday live at 3:30. There is a link in the description if you would like to call and join us. I will quickly pop that on the screen there. That's the link you can use to join the show. We also have donation links in the description if you'd like to help us out. So, that's it. Let's jump right in this week. So first, folks, we're gonna do a little bit of definitions. I know definitions are what you guys came here for, but we're gonna get into this word. And basically, this came up last night. I played a quick clip of Cameron Bertuzzi talking to Dr. Bart Ehrman, and to be honest, I just played it to make fun of Cameron, and so I didn't really get, into the depths of really what he was actually saying, so much as we were reacting to the look that he put on Bart Ehrman's face. But in this clip, he's going to discuss this term axiology. And I don't even know what that word means. Yeah, right. See, I had the same look on my face that my one black friend had. So here I've got the Wikipedia entry for this pulled up, and you can now see here. There you go. All right. So axiology comes to us from the Greek. Okay, axia, meaning value or worth, and logia, meaning the study of. So you put the logia, the study of, with the axia of value and worth, and you get axiology, okay? And it's the philosophical study of value. It includes questions about the nature and classification of values and about what kinds of things have value. It is intimately connected with various other philosophical fields that crucially depend on the notion of value, like ethics, aesthetics, or philosophy of religion. It's also closely related to value theory and metaethics. The term was first used by Paul Lepi in 1902 and Edward von Hartmann in 1908. So there, folks, we've officially just schooled you. We've just brought you into our world where now you, like us, have a firm grasp of this term axiology. All right, but look, I'm going to play the clip. As you can tell, axiology has to deal with values. That's why the title of today's episode is Where Do You Get Your Values? And hopefully we're going to enter into that conversation. A little bit of background on the piece. Cameron Bertuzzi, that we'll be watching here, Capturing Christianity. You guys can go ahead and check him out for so much more of that great content. He's interviewing Dr. Bart Ehrman, who is one of the foremost, at least American biblical scholars, as far as I know. And Bart Ehrman is an agnostic atheist who is a prominent Bible scholar. And it puts a lot of theists in an awkward position because on a lot of topics, they really like to quote Dr. Ehrman. Yes. Because, he supports things like the historicity of Jesus. He is certainly an expert if you want to, sort of get into what do we really know about the Bible, where does it come from. So he is definitely an expert, but I think his position makes him a little bit of an enigma in the field, right? Because the theists kind of love him. They love to bring him into their churches and bring him into their
Universities.
workshops and their universities. Yes, he brings a lot of expertise with him. But then once he starts wandering into that agnostic stuff, it's like, wait, we don't want Bart Ehrman anymore.
They want Bart Ehrman a la carte. We'll have
Yes.
this, and I don't want those green beans. There's some weird sauce on them. Yeah.
So let's actually I'm going to back up a little bit. Let me remember where this is at. This is at 437. And then Bart Ehrman talks a little bit about his faith at one point. I'm going to see if I can, if y'all bear with me for a second, I'll pull that
directly. That'll probably affect everybody in one way or another. But there are lots of issues. What are our kind of accounts of this? Are they reliable accounts? Do we have eyewitness accounts?
So in this early part here, he is plugging a recent debate that broke the internet. And I say that because it was paid for. It was like a big pay-per-view thing. It was a big deal versus Mike Licona for like 7 hours talking about did Jesus actually rise from the dead? So we're going to just hear something. There's a clip in here I'd like to hear Bart Ehrman say. Let me see.
What can we say about the Gospels as historical sources? And what can historians do with miracles? I mean, can historians, just regular old historians, show what God has done, that God has raised somebody from the dead? Is that the sort of thing that a historian can show? And so I used to be a firm believer in the resurrection. Like Mike, I was an apologist. Actually, I used to argue for it, but now I absolutely don't believe in the resurrection. And I'm not going to try and convince people to not believe in the resurrection, but I'm going to show why it's very, very the sources are not the kind of things you can use in the gospel sources, and historians really can't even deal with the issue. And that seems weird, but that's what I'm going to try and show.
So tell me one thing about this debate that maybe you haven't said on.
We're going to go a little bit back before I let him finish.
So tell me one thing about.
All right.
Seems weird, and historians really can't even deal with the issue. And that seems weird, but that's what I'm going to try and show.
Now, I just remember, folks, he said historians cannot even deal with the issue, but that's what I'm going to try to show. And this is the problem Christians have, I think, with Dr. Ehrman, right? He is so great on the biblical evidence, and they really want to say, yes, Dr. Ehrman, tell us about that evidence. Tell us what we can know about the Bible. And then he, with the same sort of academic consistency, will say, well, hey, by those same standards, we can't document the historicity of something like a miracle. And then it's like, no, Dr. Ehrman. What are you talking about, Dr. Ehrman? Why are you saying these things?
Well, he's trying to be even-handed.
So tell me one.
Yes.
I think that needs to be more respected. Like, look, he's trying to give you what Christianity has earned, and at the same time couch that in a way that's realistic.
Yes.
There may be some real achievements that have been done by the religion, and it would be wrong to say that there haven't been. But there's also, how do you divide it from the mythology of that age? It's made to be inseparable by a mind that's not being objective, by a mind that's not viewing all the evidence. It's sort of the outsider's test of faith. That's not being done generally by most believers of any faith, really. They're not taking into account, well, yeah, their gods sort of fall down, and when I put my God in the same light, it falls down too. So go ahead.
Exactly. No, I couldn't agree more.
One thing about this debate that maybe you haven't said on any other program so far, what's something unique about this particular debate other than the fact that it's 7 hours long?
Yeah, so the 7 hours is not going to be boring, by the way. This is going to be there's going to be lots of stuff coming out. And it'll be like, having a series of back and forth on different kinds.
I disagree, y'all. I cannot imagine a 7-hour debate all day between Bart Ehrman and Mike Licona that doesn't bore me. But hey, Great sales pitch.
issues. And so it's not going to be us just repeating ourselves time and time again. It's going to be a lot of different things. But one thing is, I've done these debates on the resurrection a number of times with Mike and with others. And my line has always been that you just, it's not the sort of thing a historian can show one way or the other. This time I'm going to explain why I don't believe it. I don't think it's right. I don't think Jesus was raised from the dead.
Now this is
I'm not against people who do.
That's the quick part I wanted people to hear. Because I've seen so many videos where Dr. Ehrman's brought into the church and held up as this great model because of all the great evidences. And I just want to play this one more time so people can be very clear about what this man is saying here.
I don't think Jesus was raised from the dead.
He does not think Jesus was raised from the dead. So let's keep that in mind. All right, folks, we're really here.
Me neither.
Me, yes.
There's
yes.
2 votes.
Count me in as well.
There's 3.
As a person who does not believe Jesus, that makes one of us, Mr. Cameron Bertuzzi. Okay, but now we're going to get into this sort of question of axiology. But if you'd like to see Dr. Bart Ehrman explain why he actually does not believe Jesus rose from the dead, you can check out his 7-hour debate with Mike Licona. But even that, do you think, all right, I'm going to ask you real quickly. Number one, is that just is that one of those examples of where, you could just be anybody if you accept the faith, but they say to reject it, you need a PhD. Like, if you want to just believe Jesus rose from the dead, that's fine. But if you don't want to believe Jesus rose from the dead, you need to attend this 7-hour seminar so you can, get into it.
Marketing. I think it's unfair for anyone to believe. I know you're joking. I think it's unfair for anyone to actually have that belief. If you are a Christian, or you're not maybe, but you still believe that maybe Jesus rose from the dead in a supernatural way, for all intents and purposes. I think it's unfair to believe that someone else isn't allowed to believe it without quite a bit of study. It is a rather miraculous, amazing claim. And we know that such claims aren't all true. And we know there may be extenuating circumstances. And if Jesus actually did live and Jesus actually did rise from the dead, it may not be anything that was a miracle at all. It could be through other means of the body. I've worked with quite a few paramedics, and I typically will ask them, can you tell me a story that ends with this way? And they lived. And I hear stories about the bottom, people from their belly button down being torn off their body, and they're still alive. I don't know if what Jesus went through could be called as severe as that, but that individual lived.
This would be like what, the swoon theory or something? Like he just didn't quite all the way die.
I believe it was the Princess Bride that said he's mostly dead.
Yes. My advisor this year was talking to me about that, actually, because he wants to actually take that line and apply it to origin of life research. Sort of the idea that things that are, when you're on the way to evolving life, you don't just jump from nothing to like a fully living cell, right? You have this sort of almost dead is not fully dead, right? Like not like dead quite yet. So super, super fun. I think MyOneBlack Friend may have hit the accidental studio exit button. I have done this to myself numerous times. StreamYard is great, but if you hit the dreaded back button or change your browser location at all, you end up just like leaving the whole thing. So we'll try to give him a minute. The other thing to bring up with this was just sort of people were talking about sort of the ethics of this pay-per-view debate. I think this debate was like $50. And, they were very, really tight about controlling the content. So people that tried to post reviews or commentary on it, got nasty letters. I know Doug, a lot of my viewers will know Doug from Pine Creek. And they'll know that he had to pull. I'm just briefly mentioning the sort of the other issue with this was the fact that it was a pay-per-view debate, and that so many people that they were real tight about the content. Like when Doug tried to do his review, he got like a nasty, threatening letter from them, and he basically had to pull all the footage from this debate and leave his video up as just his responses, which makes it look totally ridiculous. But you know, that's just kind of another thing. I like that Nathan, shout out to Digital Gnosis, has been talking about sort of the apologetics industrial complex. He did a stream on that last night. I didn't get to check it out because I was concurrently getting ready for my stream, but definitely encourage people to check Nathan out at Digital Gnosis. Good buddy of the program, always supportive and really makes great stuff. But this kind of is an example of that, right? $50 to get in, and I would kind of be honest with you. Even like listening, like you said, being fair, being charitable, being even-handed.
Yeah.
Like I'm a big wrestling fan, and I don't love the fact that they put our big events on pay-per-view, that you can't just like watch them on TV. But it is part of the business model.
Yes.
And when you do go to something like that, you know, profit-driven, like, hey, this isn't a debate, but it's a product, we're trying to make money, you now are putting other mouths to feed into the picture, right? There's the people that host this thing and the people that put it on, that answer all the emails, that do all the ticket sales, that take care of all the promotion. And so I know a lot of people want to come at Dr. Ehrman and Mike Lacone and be like, you guys are jerks for you know, having this format or whatever. Yeah. But look, let me put it to you right now. If somebody came up to us and said, hey, as the co-host of the Hot Program, we want you guys to come on this debate. It's going to be super awesome. We're going to pay you guys for it. It's going to be a big deal. But the catch is, you know, it's pay-per-view, and we're going to make sure people don't just pirate the material. I'm going to be like, fine. you know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm saying? It's business in a sense, right? And we're so used to free content in our community that we think that's the only way to do it. You know what I mean? There's really nothing, I would say, totally unethical about them having a paid-for event, just like any other paid-for event, you know, would not want you to put that stuff up.
Yeah, I'll take as much money as possible. I give away about 8% of my income as it is now. And I'm, you know, I have other goals that involve actually keeping some money.
Right.
So, I want to buy a motorcycle, an old one, and fix it up, and an old Mitsubishi or Nissan. I
would like to buy a new motorcycle. So links in description, folks, if you would like to help us fulfill our motorcycle destinies. All right, so now I think we're going to get into the axiology part. I just wanted to give you all a little lead up, a little extra fun bits, but we can go ahead and get into this now.
Sure. Okay.
It is linked in the description of this video. So, all right, with that out of the way, let's get into the topic of the problem of evil. So the first question that I have for you is, what do you think about like the traditional Christian responses, not necessarily related specifically to the Bible? I know that's what your book was about. But on the topic of like these different theodicies. So you've got the free will theodicy, you've got the soul building theodicy. Let's put the free will theodicy aside for a second and focus on the soul building theodicy.
All right, here's one quick thing that I'm going to be pausing this. We're not going to watch a lot of this. We're probably not going to watch the whole thing. We're just going to go through little bits of it. But I want to make a disconnect here really apparent. Part of the reason, I'll give you guys a little bit of backstory. Part of the reason I ended up on Cameron this week was because last week Nate did a different video where he talked about Cameron Bertuzzi's video on how to share your faith with skeptics or something like that. And so my Cameron Bertuzzi theory is that Cameron Bertuzzi's entire career, Cameron Bertuzzi, if you're listening, I'm just letting you know. It's no disrespect. It's just my opinion. That this man's entire career is motivated by his insecurity with his brother, right? You always hear him talking about it.
Interesting.
You ever hear him talk about his brother?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Yeah. He always talks about his brother, right? And so it's very interesting to me that in this video, actually, you know what? Let me go ahead and pull a clip from it because it is one of his more recent videos, and he makes I won't play the whole thing. But I'll play. Let's see. Share your faith. Should pop right up. Okay, here we go.
Your faith with skeptics. And I'm going to start with a story. You can go ahead and put up the picture. There it is. That is me in the middle. So
Oh, is that his brother?
For showing you such an old picture, but this is like, I think this is the only picture I have of the three main characters in this story. The three main characters are Craig, guy on the left, he's my brother-in-law, me, and my brother, all the way on the right there. And basically this is
Oh, it might be the younger brother that's better looking. Okay, all right. So here we go. This is actually interesting because I didn't play the whole clip, so this is part I haven't seen, and this is very interesting. But this is Cameron Bertuzzi laying out my Cameron Bertuzzi theory.
Story of how my brother became an atheist, and that's what sent me on a journey to look into apologetics and really discover whether or not Christianity was true. When he first, so the way that I found out about this, about my brother becoming an atheist, was through Craig. Craig gave me a phone call and he said, hey, look, it's a pretty serious thing. Your brother, Trevor, he's like an atheist, or he's becoming an atheist. He's really close. You need to talk to him. And I was like, it's not that serious. Okay.
Notice I was gonna say, notice the concern, right? Like my one black friend, please, if anybody ever calls me concerned about you, I hope it's some medical stuff.
I hope it's not.
Or that you're in financial trouble. But no, I agree, man. Ideally, that would never happen, right? But can you imagine? Jay, I've got some really serious bad news about my one black friend. Oh no, not my one black friend, not my co-host, not my partner. How can I go on without my one black friend? Oh my goodness, what's going on? Do we need to send financial support? Do we need to send food, clothing, and shelter? What do we need to do? How can we help him? What's going on? Well, he's changed his mind. I mean, like.
Well, hold on. Now let's be fair. What is on the line when Christians do share their faith with us? A lot of times it's motivated by the sincere desire to see someone who isn't headed for heaven, who doesn't have salvation,
right,
get salvation so that they can go to heaven and do literally, I don't know what you're supposed to do
there. Yeah, I mean, right.
There's got to be volleyball,
endless groveling.
But
seriously, you need to take some reprieve from the groveling for a little bit, for a few minutes. Get a little volleyball in there.
Pickup game, sports fans.
Yeah.
If God gets you on His OnlyFans list,
right?
That's talked about in the book of life. You get on that OnlyFans.
Wait,
list.
That's what tithes should be called from now on. If you're a tithing Christian, you're on the OnlyFans.
OnlyFans list, yeah.
Yeah, you're in the exclusive club. So, but no, you're right. Listening charitably, I mean, this is sort of the dual realities that we live in, right? Mm-hmm. On one hand, for us, this is literally just somebody had a belief about something. They no longer believe that thing. You know, in our case, we would say we're not convinced that there's a lot of evidence to support the thing they initially believed anyway. So, you know, they seem to be moving from some kind of unfounded belief to hey, I realized I may have not had the best foundation for that belief. And we're like, it's all good. But when you're a believer and literally someone's eternal fate, and this is very interesting because it's like, I'm not a Christian. I'm not a theist. I'm not a believer. Yet my eternal fate is at stake for them. Even though I don't believe in eternity. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, this is like for them, everybody has an eternal fate.
Well, look, if you had a child and the child had heard stories when they lose a tooth, the tooth fairy comes and puts money under their pillow, which I think this myth, I'm not saying fairies aren't real. I don't want any of them.
Right. We don't want to offend any fairies.
I'm just saying specifically one's job, who it is to replace teeth with money. Aren't you secretly teaching your kid not to take care of their teeth so they can have more money? As opposed to the tooth fairy should come with an invoice saying, look, if you don't take care of your teeth, you're going to have to pay a lot of money in the future. It should
exactly.
Be the opposite. So I think what we have to keep in mind is when, let's just say this could be the possibility, when Cameron's brother loses his faith, in a manner of speaking, that makes Cameron start to process, because he respects his brother, right? His brother may be particularly brilliant in a few areas, and Cameron understands this. Well, why, when he weighs the evidence that I invest so much of my time, Cameron's career field, I don't know if he'd gotten started with his podcasting at that point.
Right, I guess we'll find out, yeah, maybe.
But his faith, his general faith, he now looks at his brother, who he has a lot of respect for, who's taught the same things for the most part, right?
Right, you imagine.
And no longer buys into it.
Yeah.
So now Cameron has a crisis, potentially. He could call it something else, but is what Cameron believes true if his brother disbelieves it? Right? Is where he finds fault, where Cameron will find fault in the future. And when they discuss it, does Cameron do this, or does Cameron listen intently with interest to what his brother is saying, offer objections, really process what he's hearing from his brother, and then say, well, I understand why it doesn't work for you, but it still works for me, and goes on enjoying his faith?
So I just wanted to quickly acknowledge Deacon No Name coming through. We appreciate you coming through. We appreciate you showing love and being first. The room is open. The link should be in the description. I also popped it up on a banner if you want to join us. But thank you so much, No Name. Appreciate you coming through. Also, No Name was our first scheduled guest last week. So if you didn't check out that episode with him, about finding community, we happen to have him on as a serious resident expert in that. So go ahead and check out that episode. And yeah, No Name, if you'd like to join us, hop in. We're currently going over my Cameron Bertuzzi theory that his origin story is motivated by his insecurity with his brother. And then we're going to jump into a little bit about his conversation with Bart Ehrman about axiology and where values come from. But I really do agree with what you're saying here. And it's just very interesting. I wanted to just briefly mention that the more I mature, the more I really realize that I have the utmost respect for people who utter a single phrase. It's just like I literally started to tell my students that the three most powerful words in science are, I don't know, right? Because I don't know is the beginning of inquiry.
Yes.
Right? Like, if you knew everything, you can't do experiments on what, like, that would be boring. We already know, right? You can't get funding for what we already know. I can't apply, hey, National Science Foundation, there's been this thing that's already been figured out. We all know what it is. Can you send me money to study it, right? It doesn't work that way. We literally have to, our entire careers depend on us being able to make strong cases that start with, I don't know, right?
Yes.
And right along with that, I've decided that the highest level of respect that I have is for people who say, I've changed my mind. Like, I've changed my mind, to me, is such a beautiful, profound thing. All right, No Name, hang on one sec. Let me see what's going on. So there should be, down in the description, it's to say call in the hot program, and it should have the StreamYard link there in the description for the video. And then I'm also going to pop it up on the banner again. And so you can go to StreamYard.com and then just kind of copy this last part, which is unfortunate. They give us a new link every week, I guess, until we're seriously famous. Makes it harder to bomb the room, though, so that's kind of nice. But yeah, if you just copy that last part, I'll leave that up there for a bit, and maybe that'll help you out. But yeah, I just think that part of, like you said, right, part of this sort of cognitive dissonance is I've really invested in something, right? You said, like, we've been taught the whole thing our whole lives. This is a big part of my faith, a big part of my identity. And we also talk a lot about sort of the tribalism and the tendency for that to make us sort of double down on what we already believe, especially if those things are like social identity markers. So with all that being said, right, there's a certain risk and a certain difficulty that comes with changing your mind. Yeah. And I really do appreciate it. And also I would say, folks, welcome Deacon No Name to the program. Tremendous friend of the program. Appreciate you. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good, buddy. How about you?
Good. How are you feeling?
I'm much better. I was sick as a dog since like Wednesday. So
I've been worried about you. I've been checking my Discord, like, oh man, I hope he's all right. Yeah, man, this is a fun one. I'm really glad you're feeling better, and you were definitely included in the programming on late night Counter-Apologetics last night, which I actually did super early this morning. So check that out if you get a chance.
Oh, no kidding! I missed it. Yeah, I'll have to check it out.
Everybody, bro, I didn't do it till like 6 a.m. because I was having technical difficulties, which is why I'm so tired today. Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. I got those are the words. Got it done though. All right, so we're gonna jump into this conversation about axiology. Just to briefly summarize, No Name, I was sharing that I think Cameron Bertuzzi's origin story is this thing with his brother, right? Tell people a little bit about what is it, Doug Pitt?
Huh?
No Name was talking about. Is his name Doug Pitt? No Name.
Oh yeah. There's this little inside joke with my brothers. Doug Pitt is a real person. Doug Pitt is Brad Pitt's brother, right? And he looks kind of like Brad Pitt. This is
Doug Pitt.
Right,
okay.
Right, yeah. He's a good-looking guy, right? If Brad Pitt did not exist, I'm sure Doug Pitt would be considered a good-looking man, right? But whenever he's standing next to his brother, I mean, come on. I mean,
right. This is the guy. This is the Pitt boys.
Right. And so
Dad Pitt? Is that Dad
I think that's Pitt Dad Pitt in the middle. It must be, yeah.
Dad Pitt. I love it. It's like Dad Pool. I can't remember where I was going with that now. Sorry.
Well, just the comparison between Doug.
Oh, yeah. It's just a comparison, right? So yeah, anytime somebody famous has a brother, they're Doug whatever, like in this case, Doug Bertuzzi. Although I think Cameron in this scenario is actually the Doug.
Yeah. So the idea, right? So my theory is that this is motivated by Cameron's insecurity with his brother. So that would make him like the Doug Pitt of apologetics, right? Because he's but actually I guess he's the one that's more famous. But anyway, that's our little backstory, and we're gonna see Cameron talk about this a bit before we jump into our axiology conversation.
Okay, because I've gone through like my own period of doubt. I was in Bible school at one point in my life, right after high school, and I worked through my doubts pretty quickly. I was like, this is gonna be easy. Like, I'll just go talk to him. So I called him up. I was like, hey, look, let's talk. So we get to his house, and it was about a week.
Oh, No Name. I briefly mentioned how he was super concerned when he heard that his brother was an atheist. But for most of us, that's like sounding the 4-alarm fire because somebody changed their mind about something, right?
Yes.
Like.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Big emergency. Your brother's had a change of opinion,
Oh, God.
Later,
call the law.
I called him. And during that week, I just researched everything that I could find. I looked up debates. I looked up evidence and arguments for the existence of God. And so I had about a week to prepare. And I got to his house. And so just setting the scene, he opens the door and there's like immediately an elephant in the room. It's like, all we want to talk about is this atheism stuff, but we had to have dinner first. It was really awkward. But the point is that this was
What up,
a
Sandals?
conversation
Thanks for coming through the
that
chat.
went terribly wrong with him. First of all, it lasted way too long. It was like 3.5 hours long. And we disagreed the whole time. Our voices got very loud. It was a very, very bad experience. But one of the things that I remember is that he gave me these objections to Christianity that I hadn't thought of before. He was talking about Noah's Ark. He was talking about the problem of the unevangelized. What do you do about people that have never heard the gospel? How is it fair for God to condemn them to hell forever, for all of eternity? How is that fair? He talked about Genesis and evolution. There's a bunch of different objections that he brought.
I don't know if you guys can tell or notice this, but Cameron's T-shirt here, right, has all the arguments on it. Like, so if you read this arc going around the top of his shirt here, it says contingency, kalam, ontological, and then whatever. And then I think going across the middle, it says natural theology. This is just epic to me. Like, just epic, right? Like, just
the writer in me notices the camouflaged pants.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even notice the camo pants.
So is he saying, without saying it, all this is just camouflage for nakedness?
Ooh.
The naked truth is these arguments aren't actually that good.
Ooh, see, this is where fashion meets psychologizing. We're psychologizing based on the fashion. And yes, we can see a lot of floofy intellectual arguments mixed with camouflage with the backwards hat on, which means all this has turned him around.
The backwards hat, yeah,
it means it's all got him turned around. See, that's
I think it's a carefully cultivated look designed to appeal to youths, to look cool. I mean, like, you can tell, like, he set out to go, how can I just look like a cool dude?
Right. It's the hip,
and that backwards hat really sells it, in my opinion.
This to me is where you see a lot of the inner conflict in the church, right? Because Cameron Bertuzzi, to his credit, is a very well-known apologist. I don't think there's any doubting the success he's had, right? But this look to me says, but I really wish I was the worship/youth pastor. Right?
9-year-old me would be listening.
Right. This is the I might be an apologist, but I really want to be that cool youth pastor. And this is the youth pastor version of his apologetics.
That's what I'm thinking.
Faith that I hadn't thought about before. And so, but what I took away from this story, this meeting with my brother, was actually like a textbook case of how not to share your faith with skeptics. And so I want to talk about what went wrong that night.
Hey, Jay.
And there were basically three things.
Sure. What's up?
Well, who is the audience for this, by the way?
See, this is interesting. I'm not positive, but based on the conversation and some of the questions he got asked later, it's definitely like an apologetics crowd. So I don't know if it's maybe the link will tell us.
Because I've seen this twice now, and it just occurred to me that I don't know, is this like a church
He gave
sermon?
it at a church. It's at a church.
It is at a church? Okay.
Yeah.
I wonder if he got like 30 grand for this talk.
More than likely.
Like
he probably
first, it wasn't about love.
It must have been. He must have got paid a lot. But here's where he gets to the heart of this that is really interesting, and then we'll get to axiology.
That night, I went over there
and I just noticed there's a great tie in here because he's talking about values, and this whole axiology stuff is about values. But notice these three key points here. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about truth. It wasn't about knowledge.
I wanted to win an argument. I wasn't over there to love on my brother. I wanted to win an argument. Second, I didn't really care about truth. It wasn't about truth for me. I wanted to go over there and I wanted to defend what I grew up believing.
Stop. And I realized that was really loud. I apologize.
No, that's fine. We like the outrage.
I'm sure I heard him say, I didn't really care about truth.
I know. It's like they give the whole game away when they do this.
But during the argument, what was he reinforcing? His belief.
Right. Right.
He says, I didn't really care about truth. But it was about entertainment. Thank you.
That's
Sandals.
right, Sandals. But was it about entertainment? You know? And matter of fact, if they would stop being so selfish and make it about entertainment, they would have known to record that conversation so that all these years later we could react to it on YouTube. Because I would love to have been a fly on the wall for that conversation. Would you?
I think it would be wonderful.
Now that's pay-per-view worthy, right? I'd pay money for that.
But look, I think this is so key. A lot of times when I've had these discussions with believers, their point of view becomes believe at any cost, regardless of how rational an argument I put forward. If I've actually said to someone I was carpooling with who was a Christian, I said, come on, man, do you believe a guy who was over 500 years old built a boat the size of a high school football stadium? Pause. Yes, because that's what the Bible said. Do you believe that animals from all over the planet came to this man so he can load him on his boat that wasn't even large enough for the food? Yes, that's what the Bible says. It didn't matter what type of argument I put forward. It was believe at all costs. So it's not about the truth.
Right.
It is about what they have accepted and its value. The value of what they have accepted to them. I talked to my mom last week. I went to see her, and I can still see Jesus has a very high value to my mom because she's 86, and that's closer to him than she's ever been before.
Right. Yeah.
My aunt, who's 95, closer than she's ever been. She had to talk to me about what the good Lord gives and all that stuff too. And I sit there just smiling, and I don't need to bother with my atheism for this because this is good stuff.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say I sometimes think that's actually for what I was saying. Go ahead, you're in.
Well, I just find it very telling that Bertuzzi can admit it wasn't about truth.
Oh, I remember what I was gonna say.
Go ahead.
I sometimes ask people that'll be that's one of my new favorite counter-apologist questions, is just to flat out ask them, does it matter to you if it's true? And then listen.
And I think a good follow-up to that, Pocketlocker, would be, and if it isn't true, how will you change how you live your life?
That's great. No. And remember I said that I've changed my mind is becoming, so I don't know is like the start of what I super admire people to do, and then I've changed my mind is so important. Part of it is because I've now seen these conversations, and sometimes I think in this community it doesn't go anywhere. Like the thing I love is when you hear the stories of conversion or deconversion or deconstructing or how it helps somebody, because at least you start to realize, oh, we are still out there making a difference for these individuals. And truth be told, that's part of the motivation. I actually do want people to change their minds about this. I think it's really important. And something that I get frustrated with is that we're always having these conversations. Oh, I hear you, you hear me. And then everybody walks away from the conversation the same as they came into it. Yeah. Which is fine because people need time to reflect and think, and change and progress takes time. But I really love the idea of, man, my one black friend, we were having this conversation about, should I go try this one pizza place? And I was like, nah, I don't really trust it. But you recommended it to me. And you know what? I went there and I've changed my mind. I realized the last time I went there, I ordered the wrong thing. I tried the Sicilian pizza that you recommended, and I changed my mind because you influenced me, right? I gave it another shot. I saw that it was good. And now I'm in a different place than I was. Now, it's easy to do that about pizzas or whatever. Sometimes it's not, right? Sometimes somebody has an aversion, sometimes they just can't even try it. But really, there's so much life to be lived on the other side of I changed my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. No Name, any thoughts on this?
You're not changing my mind about pineapple on pizza. Just
Right.
that shit's gross.
Certain-
That shit's gross.
Certain things are a no-go, right? And
I agree with for myself, speaking for myself, pineapple on pizza is for other people and not for me. So
bad people.
see,
Awful people.
it's a thing that I can tell you I've done, and I can get down with it. I don't. It's not my first thing to order, but if somebody's like, "Hey Jay, we got this Hawaiian pizza for lunch," I'm
judging you harshly right now.
I'm like Sandals. Let's go with it. Hey,
Sandals in Japan, one of the most popular pizza toppings is corn.
Oh
That's
God!
just
I'm
wrong.
so sorry.
That's
I'm
just
so
wrong.
sorry for you, Sandals.
If you're Japanese, you just got banned from the channel just for being in a country that does something that.
I mean, I used to say, Japan was weird because you could buy used, panties out of vending machines there.
Yeah, but
and now
corn on the
that I
pizza
know
is way
this about
worse.
the corn, corn on pizza, that's just the fuck,
The
man.
used
Like that
panties
is just wrong. Like that is sorry.
I was gonna say the used panties from vending machines we could understand, but this corn on pizza thing. That's just
Right.
taking it too far.
Is it
There's
Mo,
many respectable traditions there, and this is one you just happen not to enjoy.
Is it like whole corn kernels, or is it more like creamed corn? Like what are we talking?
The corn on the pizza.
Oh, it's gotta be the kernels. It can't be like cream corn or something.
I don't know. They're Japanese.
Yeah,
man.
I
They
actually,
not.
yeah, I never ordered it. I don't know.
It's gotta be kernels.
Enjoy it.
Oh, it could get so much worse.
Sandals.
Let's hear Cameron talking about his brother. But no, I agree that it wasn't about the truth. And this is sometimes what I feel about the entire apologetics endeavor is it really about truth? Is it really about knowledge?
It's about continuing. It's about the message going on and the bucks continuing to be made. That's my view. And I think I could pair with that, or maybe I could take the bucks away for some people. And they have a belief that society will fall apart if we don't all cling to Christian values. But that simply isn't true. The early societies were built without Christian values.
Yes.
They weren't called that. These things have been relabeled. Other cultures invented the idea of not murdering each other. Other cultures invented the idea of kindness. Other cultures invented the idea of going out of your way to sacrifice yourself for others. Other cultures invented those things. Christianity, again, like a la carte, they just took some ideas and added them to what were already core beliefs. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, except for when you take credit for something that's not yours, Elon Musk. So, bear that in mind on a level.
Yes.
I think that may be what's at work. I guess you'd have to take it on a person by person basis to see what's really the foundation for why they hold on. Why are they holding on?
And this is actually going to be great setup for our conversation about values. I just want to make sure we get through a little bit of this. I want to hear Cameron keep talking about his brother a little bit, so y'all will understand the Cameron Bertuzzi theory.
And then third, it wasn't about knowledge. I didn't actually care about knowledge about Christianity. I cared about appearing as if I had knowledge. And these are things that I discovered as I went through and started to really think about why did that night turn out so horribly? But what I'm convinced of is that if you master these three areas, then you can have a conversation with anybody, including skeptics. So let's look at the first one, which is loving people. And again, that night I wasn't there to love on my brother. I was not. I was there to win an argument. I didn't really care what he had to say. I wasn't trying to listen to him. And I couldn't see the value in his journey of truth-seeking. And I think that's actually the journey that he was on. He was on a journey to find the truth. But I couldn't see the value in the courage that it took for him to actually embark on something like that. So let's get a quick reminder of what love is in this.
All right, so I'm not gonna play the rest of that, but something I really wanted to touch on there is this is something I think that both sides of this debate completely miss. Completely miss. And in this sense, I'm in 100% agreement with Cameron, because this is really difficult. And on the theist side, what happens is when somebody like first off, I think one, you see how deeply this affected him, which I think is encouragement to those of us that are non-believers. It means that coming out to your friends and family, especially if you're someone they respect and admire, will deeply impact them. Even if they don't convert or change their mind, they might double down and become apologists, but it will have an impact on them, and it will at least, get them thinking about these things. And I think he has certainly said as much. So take encouragement from that. But the other thing that they missed is you hear a person like a friend or a family member come out and say that they no longer believe anymore. And immediately, if you're the theist, it becomes about you. All of a sudden, if I say to you, let's say me and No Name are church friends, which we are. So me and No Name are church friends, and I come to him and I say,
I was going to say, why do we have to say that we are in fact?
Let's say we're theist church friends, right? We're Christian church friends, and I come to you,
theist church,
and I say,
okay.
And I say to you, I've been kind of struggling with the faith and having my doubts about this or that, and I'm not sure I'm a believer anymore, right? Well, right. A lot of people in No Name's position, all of a sudden they get mad, right? And it starts to become a sort of atheist versus Christian debate where the theist is feeling like their faith is being attacked, right? But imagine if somebody came to me and said, oh my goodness, I was so hungry last night. You wouldn't believe it. It's like I was starving. And then I was like, and then I just started talking about my food. Well, when I get hungry, this is what I do, right? In other words, the conversation immediately shifts to be about the interlocutor. And they're not realizing, no. I'm talking to you about something very difficult that I went through, right? I'm not trying to deconvert you. I'm trying to tell you I've deconverted. And here's how I struggled with my faith. And they just don't hear that. And then on the other side, we don't say that enough. We allow the conversation to become, oh, I'm an atheist now. And when we have this conversation, we're going to be talking about my atheism against your theism. And what we need to be reminding them constantly is I'm only an atheist, in my case, because I was a theist, because I wrestled with all of these things. It was incredibly difficult for me. It took a lot of courage. It was hard, but I was genuinely seeking the truth. And in that process, I came to no longer believe my faith. That is a totally different conversation than my atheism versus your theism.
I agree.
As do I.
Yeah, and so I just think that this is something that was actually cool that he brought that up. It actually is tough. It takes a lot of courage, and it's really hard.
What's funny? Having watched this twice.
You saw Nathan's broadcast?
Yeah, I went back later and I watched it with you, and then I watched it again on Nathan's later.
Gotcha.
And I gotta say that it's actually a fairly good talk as far as that goes. I mean, he makes some very good points that as a former Christian, when I was a Christian, I would have totally agreed with him. In fact, I agree with him in principle still now, how you should approach these conversations. But what's funny is whenever I hear some Christian apologist or evangelist say this, it's nothing that I didn't hear back in the 90s as a Christian, right? There were apologists saying these exact same things back then, right? There were pastors saying the exact same thing back then, preachers, reverends, whatever. so this is not new information. Like, it shouldn't have been new to Cameron when he had this conversation with his brother the first time around. Right? Like, why didn't he already know this? This seems kind of like 101 kind of counseling.
Oh, so I have another question for you then. Do you think we get the full real story, or do you think we're getting sort of what I call the pastoral version? You know how pastors sometimes...
Yes.
Yeah.
I know all about the pastoral version of a story. Yeah. It's there is a grain, there may be a very, very small grain of truth in there somewhere, but much like an oyster will create a pearl out of a grain of sand over time by accreting, bullshit onto it. That's basically what a pastoral version of a story is.
Even his language, right? He says, because now that, see, I wasn't thinking about it till you said that, but he says things like, what did he say? He said, he kept bringing up arguments I had never really thought about. Right? He didn't necessarily say he had never really heard them.
Yeah.
Right? So much as he had never given them the way to thought. And that's a slick pastoral version trick right there. Right? Because if I can't, in good faith, honestly, say I never heard it before, I can say, well, I hadn't really thought about it like that before, which in passing to an audience kind of gives it that, it blew my mind, without digging too into. So
either that or depending on the audience, if you've got an audience full of apologists, then it's language that lets them forgive his inability to convert his brother or beat his arguments, right? Because, they were arguments he had never heard before. Yes. He had already talked about how he'd spent a week preparing. Right? Like he had spent a week just prepping all this material, all these arguments, all the best defenses, counter arguments, everything. And then he gets over to his brother's. He has an uncomfortable dinner. And then after dinner, he spends 3.5 hours trying to convince his brother. Right? And I bet you money, 90% of the talking was done by him.
Right.
Because if you're making all these arguments, if you're laying out kalam, if you're laying out the ontological argument, all these things take time, right? And I bet you he had fucking notes, like copious binders full of reference material. And so he would reference these things, and then his brother would point out something he had never encountered before.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, it was some counter argument he had never encountered before, and then he was just like, well, I'll excuse that by saying I'd never heard it before or never thought of it before.
I think part of it too is what's interesting is some of his brother's arguments were what we call the painfully simple things. How can God condemn people that never heard about him? Why does he not seem to live up to some of these omni attributes on the most basic level? Just the super basic 101. I mean, this isn't like deep counter-apologetics, right?
No. Cameron wouldn't even had to get out of Aquinas to answer. He could have gotten like one book of Aquinas and answered all those questions. Or they didn't satisfy me, but they could have at least provided an answer.
So I think what's so interesting is, I think on his channel and in the apologetics community, it's very easy to be dismissive of those type of simple objections, right? But, look your brother in the face and tell you he's stupid for mentioning that, it wouldn't be fair to condemn people to hell who never heard of God. In other words, I think some of these simpler arguments are actually quite effective. We're participating in a counter-apologetics community where things tend to go off the deep end into places that I find to be not really as practical, right? And then in this interpersonal relationship,
we're debating like finer points of theology or Christology, but you've got people who are like not atheists. I mean, they're atheists because of the simpler things.
Yes,
and those aren't addressed enough. I agree with you. I know those are simple things that are very difficult to answer.
And I'm just saying that even if somebody in the sort of apologetics internet space is dismissive of some of those simpler things, don't let that make you think that they might not still be super effective when you're having that interpersonal conversation, especially because interpersonal conversations need to find more of a common ground. And if you're going to have conversations about evidence and history and philosophy, it's harder to find common ground. Whereas you go to the, well, how can God condemn people who never heard of him? We all can wrap our heads around and have that conversation. So, yeah, I would say don't underestimate the simpler arguments. It's also interesting how, and now I'm going to transition over to the conversation with Bart Ehrman. I'll let my one black friend wrap this up, but it's interesting how Bart Ehrman's essential case, the reason he's having this conversation about the problem of evil and axiology is because that's a big part of why Bart Ehrman decides he didn't believe in God. So even for this erudite biblical scholar who gets into all these weeds and knows all the history, knows all the evidence, for him a big thing was just like, it just kind of doesn't make any sense at this basic level with all this suffering, right? Go ahead, my one black friend.
First of all, can you hear this music in the background?
Yeah, we can. But you know,
I apologize. There's a dance party, a literal dance party going on.
No, it's fine. So
what are you
have
doing hanging out with us, man? There's a dance party going on.
It's not for me. I turned down the gain. Hopefully that helps. I'll move the mic.
It does actually. It helps. And
it
like
did,
I said, you were muted, and then when you speak, open up to speak. It's no problem. Yeah,
all
no
right.
big deal.
So the weaker arguments that you may think are weak actually may prove quite strong, because you never know what the glue is holding it all together. There's probably glue, tape, and slime for mortar, as the Bible would put it,
right,
that's holding their faith together. And it's not like it's your mission or something to knock them out of being faithful, but it may be your mission just to have peace in your non-belief. And they kind of need the same thing. They need peace in their belief, which is why there's an argument to begin with, I think, a lot of times. So you got to remember, this is your life. It's your personal space. You have a right to say, like, this isn't really something I want to get into right now, or you could limit how long the conversation goes, or you can say, look, make 3 points and never refute any of those 3 to that person. Just let them get their 3 points out. And if you show up in church the following week, they get it. They were effective. If you don't, well, then they know, well, the arguments weren't as good as I thought. So I'm going to mute myself until...
Yeah, no, actually, it's fine. I can't even hear it right now. So you're good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The funniest thing is that y'all's takeaway from this talk is far different from my takeaway from this talk.
Oh, what was yours? Go ahead.
My takeaway from this talk is really the bad guy in all this is Cameron's brother. He basically created Cameron, right? So my takeaway as an atheist is just if Cameron comes to you with 3.5 hours worth of, argumentation and everything, just nod and say, oh, okay, well, I didn't see it that way before. Oh, I'm totally a Christian now. And then he'll leave, right? He'll leave, and he won't feel compelled to start some bullshit ministry to where we all have to listen to Cameron go on and on.
And that's why there's a Batman, a Spider-Man, and so on.
Now, brief lightning round question. Are apologetics... Do we want the Camerons of the world to not become apologists, or do we need them to become apologists because they're help exposing the cracks in the foundation?
Oh, it's like Unbreakable, right? Do we create our own supervillains so that we can be the heroes in the story?
Right.
Yes.
And we both think we're the heroes in the story.
Right.
Your therapist may very well tell you you are attracting those foils into your life so that you can be the hero. Literally, you those behaviors may. But without Cameron, would you be here together right now? Yes,
exactly.
Yes, Sandals. There'd be somebody else.
There'd be some other apologists, but we get your point. That's definitely what.
But if they all went away, what would we have to complain?
Right?
About?
Who will we have to critique?
Gun violence.
I'm sure we'd come up with something.
Stuff like that. There's plenty to talk about.
That's true as well.
There are, and that brings up a good point. I mean, I know everyone has their interests, everyone has their niche, right, on the internet. But one thing that I I actually don't see a lot of, and maybe that's something that I need to do to create my own community for, is just topical conversations about other things amongst atheists, right? Like it seems like a lot of times the only unifying force is our mutual dislike of religion or our mutual disbelief. Maybe it would be because I don't think you actually dislike religion, Jay.
No, it's
Right.
very
No, we
interesting to
don't.
me.
Right.
Yeah, I guess disbelief is what I should have said to begin with.
Right.
But I mean, outside of that, it's funny when political conversations come up, and then all of a sudden you see the schism, right? You see the divide in the conversation. You'll have a group of people on one side of the issue and a group of people on the other, and both groups will be equally shocked that another atheist could disagree with them about this, right? And
Yeah,
so
totally.
I think in a vacuum of Christianity, right? Like say Christianity just went away tomorrow, and all of us atheists, yay, cheer, hooray, and we're all high-fiving and shit. And then it's like, okay, what do we talk about now, right? And we start talking about
The rapture.
anything else. We start talking about school shootings in Texas, and the next thing you know, we've got half the crowd being so pro Second Amendment that they're like, it's worth the sacrifice of a few children every month or whatever to
to maintain
to enshrine, to keep that right available to me. And then you'll have another group who'll be like, no, there's no justification for it. And so I think opening up the conversation to be about other things is okay.
So I completely agree with you, and we've done a couple political leaning episodes, late night apologetics, but I think you and I can probably find even, and MyOneBlack Friend and I have talked about this too, we could probably find a space to be even more explicit in those conversations, because I totally agree. And I also got to be honest with people, my whole motivation to being in this space, well, one of them is to make friends, two is to make fun of theists, but another one is really political. I mean, like I didn't care until, right? Because to me, it's like, if you believe something and I believe something else, who cares? Like, literally, who cares? It's not important. That's the spice of life. I like blue, you like yellow, and the world goes round and round. But when it comes to, you have a belief, and that belief makes you do something or vote for something or support something that I feel literally threatens my way of life or my safety or my security, and we can't seem to come to an agreement on this, this is what we need to be talking about. And part of the reason I even want to do it early is because I think what happens is, if you're just an atheist kind of anti-religious space or open to theism, first off, I think that's a big thing, right? Like, if you're open and you include everybody, but then all of a sudden you start shifting towards, well, I didn't know how you really felt, then you alienate part of your audience. And then I think what happens is, if you go into that political space, all of a sudden, like you said, people didn't realize that you had this political view or that political view, are all of a sudden going, well, I don't know if I support this person anymore, and it's a whole big deal. So I think it's important, like, if you just establish from the beginning, hey, we're not going to shy away from talking about these things, and we're going to be transparent about where we stand on them, whether you like it or not. I think that helps people so that you don't end up in an audience capture situation where now you've got so many viewers, or maybe you're making a certain amount of income on your channel and your content, and you feel like you can't afford to alienate part of your audience, if that makes sense.
This is why we see Dr. Craig transitioning, I think, because he's got enough money. So now he can say anything.
Oh, that's a good point. That's
interesting.
What is the liberating point, do you think?
I'm sure it changes. You can spend a certain amount of money every month until you die. I just had a conversation about my brother with this. He sold his company. And so I was like, well, what do you want to do when your contract is up? Because he's contracted for so many years to work for them. And he didn't really know. But he can say F you to pretty much everybody he wants now, to their face. and not worry about the ramifications. Like, well, it doesn't really concern me. I don't have to think about it anymore. And yeah, his retirement can be whatever he wants it to be. Craig may be in that position. Well, shoot, Craig's got to be what, 71 years old, 72 maybe?
Yeah.
He's got to be thinking, maybe I should speak my mind now.
Right.
Maybe I should tell people how I really feel now. Or maybe he sees the damage it can cause by being so dogmatic and saying the text is absolutely right in everything it says. You can't disagree with any of it. And maybe it's that. I don't know.
I also just think a lot of it might be age too, right? As you get older, like you said, speak your mind. Also, there tends to be less consequences. I mean, even my teaching mentor, just being at a different stage of his career, one of the things I love about working with him is like he has tenure. I think he's considered probably a senior faculty member. So we have so much flexibility in the classroom because what are you going to do to him at this stage in his career? Whereas I'm just getting started, right? So if I wanted to do something in the classroom that went against university policy or was a little bit of experimentation, I'd have to ask a lot and try. And then I'd be super concerned about what the student feedback would be, right? Because, from me to that close to retirement place is decades away potentially, and any of these things could stop me from getting there. Whereas him being closer to retirement, having tenure, like you said, probably being financially okay, he's like, hey Jay, let's try some stuff. You know what I'm saying? And it's super fun for me to just be along for the ride in this sort of liberating stage of his career, right? And I'll have to pay that forward to a young scholar when I get there. But it is really kind of fun and liberating. Now, another theory that Prophet Azad spit out. Hang on, I just wanted to throw this.
Whether you like it or not, whether you think it's explanatory or not.
I love to go to the William Lane Craig. Now, I just like to share this. I want to share this one very special William Lane Craig quote because the hardest one to find was this.
We have a powerful cumulative case.
I love the cumulative case. Like, that is one of my William Lane Craig classics. But people don't know the most profound thing he's actually said. He actually said something so brilliant one time, it literally floored me. Like, I literally almost fell out of my chair and onto the ground because it blew my mind so much. Just get ready for this, folks. This is so profound.
There are no married bachelors.
I mean, just brilliant.
Boom.
Here I am to
Boom.
disagree. Bachelor
Mic
is a last
drop.
name. We have female bachelors. We have bachelors that are 9 years old, 6 years old, 2 years old. There are plenty of
because of the last name. There are lots of married bachelors.
As a last name.
Oh yeah. My
mom.
my mom and dad have even though they didn't legally separate or anything, they've lived separately for about 7 years now. And I would argue that my dad is in fact a married bachelor.
He's a married bachelor.
Yeah.
That's super, super interesting, actually.
Interesting take.
Also, so Prophet Azad likes to talk about William Lane Craig.
Articulate and confident way of saying the dumbest things. The huge gap between his command of the English language and his basic reasoning skills. Idiot or willful piece of
So Prophet Azad gives it to him. And his theory is this. He thinks it's the age thing. He thinks William Lane Craig is starting to slip. He thinks he's not being as... So you think he's speaking his mind, right? He thinks
I think he's finally able to speak his mind. Why I say this is he had a criticism of Apologia where he may have misunderstood something that Apologia said about his education and learning from bachelors of sciences. The sciences don't get married. Interesting take. Again, it's all in your context that you give it, whether or not it's actually true. But
It's a great point, Sanders.
He commented that Apologia had missed being educated in thinking that the Earth is 6,000 years old. Now, right there, and I think that video of that is over a year old. right there, Craig is showing his cards. He's like, look, folks, the world is not 6 to 10,000 years old. It's not. And I think maybe he got some pushback early on and realized this didn't even hurt me. And again, I think Craig has bankrolled himself. He saved his money. He didn't buy an extra truck and an extra car like me.
Yeah, the extra used motorcycle to fix up.
Yeah, I haven't got the motorcycle. I'm going to spend about $4,000 on the motorcycle. Start out with like a sub $1,000 model, and
I got you.
I'll make it amazing. But anyway, all that being aside, I think that's Craig's route. Is he finally realized the world's going to be okay if everybody doesn't love Jesus. And I'm not saying that he believes the atheists are right about this or that. I don't know that that's the case. But I think it simply came down to the point where he got sick of holding his breath and biting his tongue. And he got sick of some of the madness that he sees from people who, again, they think they're being dogmatic, right? They think they know what. I'll say this. This is true this is my statement about gun laws too. A lot of people think they know what people want, but they're wrong. I think a lot of politicians think they know what Christians want, but they're wrong. I think a lot of Christians know what they think every other Christian wants, but they're wrong. There's so much diversity, and that's where we should be embracing things, I think, to realize there's a diversity of opinion. And I think Craig is finally embraced his own diversity of opinion. Like, look, I'm just going to disagree with people. I'm just going to tell it like it is.
I also just wonder if it's an authority thing. Like, I think audience capture is a real phenomenon, right? Like where your audience demands certain opinions or stances or leanings from you, and you then are sort of, you have to continue to give them what they want, right? And I think for somebody like Craig, this becomes really problematic because I think authority is important to him, right? The idea that he's the super high educated one, he's the erudite scholar. And like you said, this idea that you can keep demanding young earth creationism out of him, or you can keep demanding that he doesn't come out too strongly, in support of this or that doctrine, or you can keep demanding that he, says negative things about Catholics or whatever. And I think all these things are happening. He's slipping up more. He's getting older. His money's good. But I think that might also be part of it too. That I would say that there's no reason that a person can't resent that. Like, imagine if Joe Rogan, I think Joe Rogan has actually been letting out his secret inner right-wing conspiracy nut, right? But imagine if Joe Rogan was super liberal, but his audience kept demanding that he go further and further down the right-wing rabbit hole, right? You could eventually come to resent your own audience, right? And then come out with no, I'm the authority here, and I'm gonna pull this back, where I want to go. Go ahead, my one black friend.
This is one of the most you stumbled upon something. This is one of the most remarkable things I've seen in probably the 17 or so years that I've been an atheist, where I'll be listening to a minister and I'll hear them say things and I go, that guy wants out. That guy is tired of standing up there in front of those people saying the same thing again and again. He's sitting on millions of dollars. He's already got the Rolls Royce, the nice house, blah, 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 travel the world, and he's sick of doing this. He's sick of serving other people. So he's going to do stupid things. So they throw him out instead of just saying, I've been here a long time. I think it's time to pass the torch. They don't know how to quit, sort of like a young baby doesn't know how to soothe itself to go to sleep. And I think that's how a lot of those people...
Ministers cannot quit. It's really tough. And it's funny you mention that because I think ideally a pastor should do that, right? They should say, I'm good, time to pass it on. Number one, your congregation is just, the demographics are shifting, and that's usually a good idea. Two, I just think, when you lose that hunger, it is good to give it to somebody who they want their time to grow and do the thing. But I see this with my grandfather. Like, my mother has been trying to convince my grandfather to kind of retire from the ministry and move to different parts of the country where they could just retire and live easy. They've kind of earned that. And I'll tell you how bad it's gotten. Instead, my mother is going to sell her house in Ohio, and her husband are going to move to New Jersey to take care of my grandparents. Right? They just gave up on getting them to leave the church. They just like gave up. If we want to take care of them, we're just going to have to move to them and build this house and then let them commute to their church because, they, like most pastors, are going to probably die in that seat. Go ahead.
It may be in your grandfather's case that's his legacy.
It is.
And he doesn't have somebody ready to hand to take over that legacy that he trusts.
Totally.
So he's just got to ride that tornado out. He's got to ride it out. Regardless of how little or how much he loves it. It's all that's going to be left of him when
he doesn't
gone.
and also I think he feels a responsibility for the flock, right? And their sort of aging flock that they've all been together 40, 50, 60 years in some cases.
That's beautiful though.
It is totally beautiful. It's totally beautiful. And so how do you just say to them, hey, sorry, I'm a dip. I'm going to go chill on the beach with my retired daughter? I mean,
I'll show you, brothers and sisters. We've come a long way together. It's been a long, sometimes rocky, but ultimately peaceful journey. We've held hands, we've cried together, laughed together, and we've worshiped together. The worshiping will continue, but I'm not going to be doing it here.
Right.
But I'm going to Ohio because my daughter has been begging me to go over there so she can look after me because I don't do that so well.
Right.
So I wish you all well. Peace and love to you. Peace, love, and soul, actually, to you all.
Yeah.
May God's light continue to shine upon you.
I'm gonna clip this for him. This is the script. This is the script
God's light continue to shine upon you. I'll write his last sermon if you need.
You write it for him.
I'll write it for him. Yeah, I'm fantastic at that.
We're here to help out.
I'm here to help.
All right, let's get into Cameron and Bart talking about the topic that I know the theists especially came to hear. I know the theists, they just came to gather around the fire. They were like, oh my goodness, are we going to talk about axiology? I'll be there.
Oh, right. Yeah, that was actually the topic. Yeah. I forgot about that.
All right, here we go.
What do you think about that theodicy as a response to this problem?
The reason I'd actually paused this is because of this line that he said.
I think it would help if you would explicate it for a second, because...
Here we go. It would help if you would explicate it.
But
check this out.
On the topic of like these different theodicies. So you've got the free will theodicy, you've got the soul building theodicy. Let's put the free will.
It's the Christianese of it all, right? So you've got the free will theodicy, the soul building theodicy. Let's set this one theodicy aside. And then Bart, well, if you could explicate it for me. Just nonsense.
Theodicy aside for a second.
Well, when you're explaining Wingardium Leviosa to a non-Harry Potter fan, it's going to sound a little weird, right?
Yes, that's exactly what I feel like I'm experiencing, right? like I just got hit with some hardcore Harry Potter vocabulary.
Yeah.
And it went over my head, and I'm supposed to just go, oh, it's probably because I don't have enough faith or something like that. But it's just so...
Well, it's also by virtue of the fact that none of these terms are actually, like, biblically sourced.
True.
Right?
Right. These are theological terms of interpretation.
You can be a biblical expert like Bart is and not know a damn thing about these various, theodicies and exegesis and things like that are more in the theological realm.
You just stumbled on something. No, when the Christians do it, we're no longer going to call it exegesis. We're going to call it exegesis.
Yeah.
Oh, it's too funny.
What do you think about that theodicy as a response to this problem of evil?
I think it would help if you would explicate it for a second, because different people have mentioned things by that. Yeah.
Sure. So what I have in mind is basically there are these virtues that can be attained when you experience suffering. So basically suffering makes the possibility of virtues like forgiveness, courage, sacrifice possible. And it's only in the face of suffering that these virtues are possible.
Right. Yeah. My counter to that argument has always been, okay, little thought experiment. I'm a baby, right? I'm a year old. I was raised in a basement by my 12-year-old mother, by my grandfather / father, who had, has locked her up in the basement.
Wait, hang on, hold that up, because we're listening to No Name, and then I want to see that note. Go ahead.
I think this takes away from what No Name is saying. Let's let No Name finish.
Yeah, go ahead,
okay.
No Name.
We can circle back to this note, which has
Okay.
been sitting on my lamp for weeks.
Oh, hey! So this is almost like the spirit moved me to say this.
All right, go ahead, No Name.
But yeah, like so, in my short life in a basement full of suffering, right? My grandfather / father only, feeds us through a slot in the door or whatever, and then at some point he decides to take wild hair and just rapes me to death, right? So my short life in the darkness has only been miserable suffering, ended by the free will decision of my father / grandfather to kill me. What soul building virtues did I in fact acquire in my short year of suffering? Like what is the value? What is the value to my soul in this endeavor?
Well, in that example, I think you're lacking a lot of, as a baby that young, you're lacking a lot of reference. If what you know is pain and maybe some comfort from getting enough to eat or having enough sleep, you might think that's the way that the world is. It's simply that way. And I would say there's no maturing in that, other than maybe the harsh acceptance that this is your lot. And you may not even know enough to know that it shouldn't be that way, or you may not know enough that it could change if you were set free. You may not realize there's a great big outside world out there. Think of how small the worldview is for someone in that situation. Meanwhile, the father / grandfather is well aware, more than likely, of the outside world and all these other opportunities that could await that baby. If the suffering were just taken away and even a normal life given to that child, or somewhat normal. What is sunshine like? What's it like to play outside and run through the water hose and all that sort of thing? If you were to give that child that child could know joy in a new way, and not just the horror and the pain that it's been experiencing.
It reminds me of we're doing the audiobook Christopher Hitchens' God Is Not Great. We'll be doing, I think we're on chapter 3. We'll be doing this today at 10, about 5 hours, on the Jay Bundy channel. But he talks in that book about an example of a girl who was basically kept in the basement and like raped by her father or something for like 25 years. And how she must have prayed to God. And can you imagine all those prayers going unanswered? Yeah. And that's kind of what No Name's example reminded me of. Just really profound stuff. And you can see that it really, one of the things that I respect about Dr. Ehrman is that it's something he really thought about, and it changed his mind. Let's go to that note real quick, my one black friend.
Oh yeah. What was the note?
My note says.
Can you hold it up for us? We can probably read it. We love to see the.
But if I hold it up for you, I can't read it.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Here's, in case you want to pause it, if you're watching the playback.
Yeah, you can pause it and read it. All right, but go ahead.
Okay. This is born out of the abortion discussion that's going on lately, and there are a lot
favorite topic.
People with value systems, and many of them Christians, that believe that the mother, that the unborn has a right to life at any cost. We had that discussion some weeks ago, and
check that out.
I'm pro-choice, but I'm not pro-abortion unless there are extenuating circumstances, like maybe someone has been raped, there's incest, I would say involuntary incest, or something of that ilk, or maybe there's some sort of deformity where this child's going to be dead in 3 days anyway. Then I'm glad it's other people who have to make up their minds and not me. But I considered about how a lot of our lawmakers, I'm specifically thinking of Lauren Boebert, who's always throwing God into every speech and using religion to influence her audience. Marjorie Taylor Greene does the same thing, and they're not the only ones. Those ladies aren't the only ones. And I would imagine they're sincere, that they're trying to do the best job that they can. But I have to wonder, I had to scratch my head, and I wrote this. I'll actually share a second note with you. Are Christians subconsciously making the world a worse place in order to increase suffering? Because suffering is a sign that God loves you and is looking out for you. Remember, the Bible says, I chasteneth who I love, you know?
So I think we got to do a whole episode on that. I think that has to be a whole. It's got to be a whole episode, because I think the answer is yes. I think the answer is yes, and the episode has to be about, or there could be a number of episodes. We do a whole series on this, but to me, it's got to be about trying to identify that continuum of what are sort of the like you said, the inadvertent efforts to where you're just part of a sort of a suffering, loving culture, we might say, or something like that. And then how much of it is even explicit to where some people are like the bring on the eschatology type of people, where they seem to be, I mean, but this is a fascinating point. And again, like I said, I love that we're the three of us are like-minded in that sense, that this is why I think this conversation is important, because of the Lauren Boeberts of the world, because of the Marjorie Taylor Greenes. And believe it or not, I think they're supported by a less extreme sort of pseudo-Christian majority that in their religiousness, right? Because they do the religious dog whistling. Even the more moderate ones, let's say the more moderate Republicans, right? They're all Bible forward, right? Vote for me because I love Jesus, right? And I'm God, guns, and country. That's why they can't say anything about the Second Amendment in the middle of all these mass shootings, right? But even your Joe Bidens and your moderate Democrats, Joe Biden can come about when you ask him about that, something like that, he can come out against Marjorie Taylor Greene, but notice how he'll always stay on the politics. He'll always go to, oh, well, I don't agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene about the Second Amendment, or Lauren Boebert's wrong about critical race theory or whatever, right? Now, if you bring the religion aspect to him, he'll probably say something like, well, yeah, I happen to be Catholic and I believe they're wrong about, their interpretation or whatever. But my point is, that rarely ever happens, and he doesn't even need to do that. And because of the fact that they're all, at least in nominally, on Team Jesus anyway, they can't go there, right? They could talk about the politics.
I think they can't go there because that's not the realm of politics, right?
But
I'm
what
sorry,
he's
No
saying
Name. I don't
is,
want to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
Did you have more, No Name?
No, that was it. I was just saying it's not really the appropriate arena for that conversation.
Right, but I'm saying they make it the appropriate arena when they say it. So when they say, oh, we have to shut down women's reproductive rights because of my religious stance, all I'm saying is you would want to be in a system where the other politicians can call that out and say, not only are you wrong about reproductive rights, but for you to do so on the basis of your religious thinking is totally ridiculous. We don't get politicians even on the opposite side. Even their opponents won't say that, because at least nominally they're on Team Jesus as well. And so they can't come out in opposition to them using God that way.
I'm going to disagree. I'm going to disagree. I think there's enough real estate scriptures in the Bible, if you will, that you can make any conclusion you pretty much want to. So I listen to Counter-Apologetics. I've been listening to that guy for years. I'm a big fan, and he played a clip on the show earlier last week of a man at some sort of city council meeting, I believe it was, talking about how gays should be murdered. And as
Whoa.
I listen to that, for Christian reasons, right? For
Sure,
biblical
sure.
reasons. I shouldn't say Christian. Maybe that's unfair. For biblical reasons. And I thought, why is there no one that stands up and says, Jesus famously said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you? He didn't say, because you don't like the lifestyle of people who have different choices than you, or maybe it's not a choice, who have a different lifestyle than you, regardless of what that is. He doesn't say persecute them. He doesn't say, let's have you kill them off. He doesn't say that. You can find it in the Old Testament, but he doesn't say that. Why does no one have the courage? I would do it if I were there, to stand up and say, you're wrong.
Let he who is without sin cast the first stone, right?
Say again, no name?
Let he who is without sin cast the first stone.
True. I mean, all of these scriptures are there.
And you know what? Somebody's throwing a rock because they feel, well, my sin isn't as bad as that.
Right.
And
Right.
That's why that person can stand up there in front of that group of people at that meeting and say that, well, I'm not as bad as they are. And they can point all around the room. I didn't do what they did. I've heard
Christian pastors make that argument from the pulpit, right? I've been to moderate churches where the pastor was up there hammering away about how you look in the media and you think the only two things that Christians care about are abortion and homosexuality. Right. And it's allowed. I say allowed. It's made it to where if you were to just say you were an alien, right? You were flying by Earth and you were taking a quick sampling of the religions and cultures and things like that. You would think Christianity is only about those two topics from the media, from a media standpoint.
I could easily agree with many who have said Jesus would recognize the Christian church in the United States as his own. He wouldn't.
He wouldn't.
No way.
You people have got to be kidding me. This isn't
right.
This isn't what I was about.
And just for the record,
it's like if me and Jay really get the Church of the Flying Man off the ground, so to speak, pun intended, and then we die, and we come back. We're resurrected by AI, alien technology 2,000 years from now, and it's become a real religion, like a Joel Osteen comes
like
out
a
of
theist church, like an actual,
like
the Bible man is like the real God and like miracles and the whole thing, and we're just like what the hell?
But you get literally you get a Joel Osteen type mega pastor out of it, and you're like, how do you get from our message of doubt and irony and sarcasm?
I can tell you, because each person, I'll go back to the expression, a personal relationship with Christ.
Oh yeah.
Each person has a way that they relate to your material for the Flying Man faith. And some will memorize favorite verses from, all of them will memorize or hold on to favorite verses from the Flying Man story. And they will be dear to them because they relate to them in a particular way. They got them out of a funk or something like that. Some of the wisdom from the Flying Man anthology has helped them along, has helped them become strong. And if you make someone strong, you own them.
And
dude, I'm imagining the 2,000 years from now atheist experience call in with the 2,000 years from now Matt Dillahunty analog, right? And you got this guy calling in, and he's like, "Look, I've got the evidence for the Flying Man," and Matt's like, "Okay, hit me with it." He's like, "I was driving one night, and I said, Myron, take the wheel, because I had a blowout, and I was going to go off the road and die, and I said, Myron, take the wheel, and I just felt this overwhelming presence, and I was able to steer the car in an expert manner around this hairpin turn that I normally would have died, But Myron saved me.
2,000
Right.
years from now, Tesla finally perfects autopilot.
And the funny thing is, and the funny thing is I think so we have examples like Joseph Smith of somebody who definitely started a religion that they wanted to, right?
Yeah.
But we have examples like Haile Selassie, right? Where dude explicit, yeah, or dude, does that say it the right way?
Haile Selassie.
Haile Selassie. So he definitely was like on record. We have the records where he was like, "Don't start a religion about me." Like, no, don't. I'm not a god. Like he was like, "Don't do it," and they did it anyway, right?
But we have what Jesus said. Jesus in the Bible said, "Don't worship me, worship my Father." We have a religion called Christianity where everybody sits around worshiping this guy,
right,
all the time.
Well, that's
right?
exactly what I'm getting at. I think you're dead on. Is that if he showed up, like, you know, and looked at the church, he might not only not recognize it, he might be like, I explicitly instructed they started this nonsense when I was around, and I shut it down.
You're supposed to be a Jew, for fuck's sake.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Like that would be epic. Go ahead.
He's Ethiopian, though. He may very well be descended. He may very well.
You never know
from Jewish people, because there are Beta Israel are Ethiopian Jews.
Yeah, that's true.
You go reread that Old Testament. They sure keep mentioning Ethiopia a lot. Now, are they referring to Ethiopia the country, or Ethiopia as in Africa in general?
Right.
Sometimes
that's a tough call. I mean, in antiquity, there was a lot of those terms. Yeah.
Sometimes it's vague. And so you got to remember that Jerusalem is a heck of a lot closer to Ethiopia, the country that is today Ethiopia, than it is the Caucasus Mountains or England.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Heck of a lot closer.
Definitely.
So,
the Ethiopian church claims that they have the Ark of the Covenant.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
wow.
And they've got all these connections with, like, what was it, Queen Zenobia?
And that would be so unacceptable to people as well, right? Like if the history panned out, but it was the alternate history, and it was, you know, like a African, like the one where it's like, oh no, there really was a Jesus, but he was in Africa, and it was, you know,
right.
two you know, decades earlier or whatever.
Laughing hard or crying hard.
Right. Like they won't know what to do.
I think, you know, it's funny. I mean, I know this is going to sound like super racist, but I don't mean that I agree with it. I'm just saying, like, I bet you if it turned out that we found good evidence that Jesus was black, right? Like Jesus was a real guy, but he was a black guy. That would cause so many white American Christians to leave the faith.
You know what? It's funny. I
would get an excellent deal on a church to buy as a house. I could get an excellent deal on a church.
Dude. They would be like, yeah. Oh man, that would be great.
But I think I think what's interesting is I remember growing up, it was a big deal when they started to put together who Jesus would have really been, because it was a time where they were the Shroud of Turin was big, right?
Oh, right.
And so
Shroud of Turin is still big.
Listen, that is the best piece of single evidence you will ever see. There is no way to reproduce it with modern technology. It is not a forgery.
No name is correct.
So when they started looking at the I wouldn't call it the science, but sort of the ethnography or whatever of what Jesus would have looked like based on our best estimates of, you know, who he would have been based on what we have. And it became very clear that he looked kind of like a funky Saddam Hussein, right? Like he was, you know, he's Middle Eastern and he's got the dark hair and, you know, the
what else would he fucking look like?
He looked like
I mean, like, why wouldn't he look like a like Taliban, right? Like, there's what I say. I mean, but yeah, have you seen Don't Mess with
My One Black Friend? Who did you say he looked like?
Oh, I'm sorry.
The Shroud of Turin guy looks like Charles Manson.
Oh,
yeah.
the Turin, the Turin guy
Turin
is
image
obviously
is weird.
He looks like Charles.
Yeah,
Manson.
Yeah,
he does look like
yeah.
Charles Manson.
You're absolutely
Yeah,
100%
it's
right about
obviously
that.
based on a very
He
like,
does resemble Charles Manson a little.
You must agree.
I can see that.
I wish I could. I can't even do that accent. Go ahead. Go ahead, No Name.
I was just gonna say, like, well, damn, brain just completely blanked out on me. Don't worry about it. It'll come back.
All right,
to
no
me.
worries. But yeah, so my point was just that I thought that would do more. Right now that I look back at it and I can say, it's been, God, I'm trying to think. If I was 14, 15, it's been 20 years. And I don't think if Jesus was real, he definitely was Middle Eastern, not white Jesus that we see in America. Matter of fact, there is a good YouTube talk, TED talk maybe, about how Jesus tends to look like wherever the people are, right?
Yes.
Not even just in appearance, but also in political ideology, So
Republican Jesus is swole and he wears a cutoff.
Right. So according to this theory, we would just say Republican Jesus is just the, Jesus of the America, particularly the American South and the white evangelicals, right? But I'm just wondering if Jesus was black. Like, we did it, we found it, and we have to recorrect. The Middle Eastern Jesus was based on us using the Judaic version of the Jesus story found in the Bible. But we've now realized that was a remake on the original African script, and it turns out the real Jesus was definitely black. Do we get a different revolt to black Jesus than Middle Eastern Jesus? Go ahead, my one black friend.
Okay, a couple points about this. If you went to Australia today and you looked around at what most of the people in Australia look like, and you could safely make the assumption, well, going back thousands of years, people must have looked like most of the people I see. I rarely see a dark-skinned person here. So, this couldn't have been a place that they lived for thousands, if not tens of thousands of years. It just couldn't be. Because when we take the frame of reference of who lives in the Middle East now, we view it through that sort of lens. Very short-sighted. Well, they all look like Ken Ham or something like that. Or who's Wolverine? What's that guy's name?
Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, they look like Hugh Jackman, Nicole Kidman. They have that sort of skin tone.
I do assume that the average Australian girl looks a lot like Nicole Kidman. So,
let's hope so. Let's hope so.
Very optimistic in that respect.
So if and we can understand how a person who isn't a modern person who knew a lot about sea travel, air travel, if we take somebody like a Yanomamo Indian and we bring them there, they would think, well, these are the people of this land, and they have been for as long as my people have been the people of our land.
Right.
But that would be a mistake. Again, Jerusalem is closer to Africa than it is to the Caucasus Mountains.
Right. So you're saying it wouldn't even have to be an earlier version. It could be just what the realistic population composition of it in that time was, and what we get is a assumption that everybody then there looked like everybody there now looks like.
That's exactly the
mistake. Okay. So I am not an archaeologist, but I know some people who are. Okay. And I mean, we have the archaeology of the Levant, Canaan, Israel, Judah, those places. We have the archaeology. We have their bones. We know what they looked like. We know their genetics. They were a pretty stable population for the most part for thousands of years. And, the Semitic people or whatever, we have the evidence of their movements, of their settlements, of their, like I said, their burials. their representations, what they thought they looked like and what other people thought they looked like. So we have a fairly decent idea. I think it would be like, I mean, don't get me wrong, people do revisionist history all the time, but it would be the worst kind of revisionist history, in my opinion, to like wipe out the Semitic people from their own, like areas, right? Like, isn't that just another form of anti-Semitism?
No, I mean, it could be if it was done that way, but I don't think, no, I think this is more of just saying, if you go back to that time, especially the Semitic people, they were dark-skinned, just like there's a lot of dark-skinned Hebrew people now. Matter of fact, some of the scholars I've been checking out recently are really suggesting that the people that identify as Hebrew may have been a group of former that were in Egypt, right? And that,
Okay, so Egypt was pretty vast, right? It was this big, long empire that stretched all the way from like the Sudan region all the way, to modern day Israel. But the ethnography of that region is we know it. Like, we've got a pretty good idea of like the ethnographics of the Nile River Valley and the Delta area and places like that. And there's a gradient of different ethnicities, right? As you make that trek. And there's been a lot of, genetic mixture and things like that. But when you look at the current population, of course, has a lot of influence from, the Ottoman Empire time period where the Turks really expanded into that region. Before that, they had been invaded by, previous, Persian and Greco-Roman cultures and all that good stuff. But their population base was settled enough that they could absorb those incoming ethnic groups, and it really wouldn't make a big dent, right? So when you look at the population of Egypt today, or if you look at the population of Canaan today or whatever, you can see in the cemeteries, you're like, okay, well, here are these bones from these group of people who lived here 5,000 years ago.
Right.
And then we look at their genetics, and then we look at the genetics of the current population.
Oh, yeah,
and it's
for sure.
90%
sure.
the same.
Yeah,
right?
I know some anthropologists have done that too. No, we definitely
I've got some challenges.
Yeah.
When you're done, I've got some challenges for this.
There will always be exceptions to these rules, and I understand that area has been a crossroads of civilizations for thousands of years. But it's had its own pretty stable population for thousands of years too. And so when you have an influx of new people, it's pretty much just a numbers game, right? And so if you've got a much larger population and you're just absorbing a smaller population, then within a couple of generations, it's like that new population doesn't even exist anymore. It just gets swallowed up. Now, there may be like a few outliers, right, where like one family stayed kind of isolated or whatnot. But with interbreeding and stuff back then, you would normally have like a small group coming into an area that's already pretty well established. So you're not going to see like a sea change, like a vast population turnover. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. I mean, I think we're all on the same page, though. We're just establishing he could have been dark skinned. Go ahead, my one friend.
The thing about the cemeteries, the things about with the Egyptians, they left lots of images of themselves, and people they still will say these were not dark skinned people. They still march Elizabeth Taylor in there. You're talking about that. Oh, my bad. No.
The Hollywoodification. That's a totally different subject. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, they were African people. Yeah, but they had a big range. Like in the South, you had like because there were whole dynasties of black pharaohs and stuff. Like, it's obvious.
Yes.
Like, you look at their facial features, you look at their remains and everything. They were black. Like, there is no Like, I don't know who argues otherwise. But
You've never
the
been on
northern, the lower Egyptian people were more like people from Libya and Morocco, Berber. You know, they weren't as dark, right? It's a gradient, right? It's like a spectrum of.
I'm gonna have to find some videos to share with you where these people present some old evidence. This is why I haven't made up on my mind if the ancient Hebrews were black or not. And I've probably listened to, I think I've got like 3 books on it and listened to like 300 hours of discussion on this. And I haven't made up my mind.
Okay.
And I don't know that I ever can.
I don't think it's as black and white, pun intended yet again, as were they black, right? I think they were, okay. It's kind of long and involved, and it may be a conversation me and you can have at another time if you're interested.
We should record it like Cameron and his brother. We should record.
Yeah,
we didn't do it. Let's not forget. We should record.
Bullet points, right? Egypt was a very vast and old empire. It lasted for thousands of years. Yeah. It had cities with populations of hundreds of thousands at any given time. And those cities were populated by people groups, ethnic groups that the conquerors had gone around and brought back to their cities basically as slaves, right? Like 90% of some populations of ancient Egypt were slaves. And then over time, those people became like settled landowners and they weren't considered slaves anymore. So they used outsider groups as slaves instead. But then that's kind of like the cycle of what happened in Egypt, right? And so when the quote unquote exodus occurred from Egypt, where the Hyksos were kicked out in the Egyptian civil war, the Semitic peoples were pretty much pushed north back into Canaan, into their historical stomping grounds, right? At this point, Egypt, the upper Egypt, southern Egypt, the more like Sudanese area, was kind of like reforming, right? They had gone through a dynastic period of weakness, and they had kicked out the Hyksos, which were quote unquote foreign rulers. That's what they call rulers from foreign lands, who were just Canaanites. They were Canaanites and Israelites who had come down and settled into the Delta area for hundreds of years during a low ebb in the power of the Egyptian Empire. When it got powerful again, it kicked them out. And in the process, they took a bunch of people, indigenous Africans, with them back up into Canaan.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at before.
This ethnic group that was forming was a mixture of Semitic peoples from the Canaan area that had come down with their, people to work the Delta area. They were Semitic, Jewish people, basically, or Proto-Arabic, Proto-Jewish, that kind of Semitic people, right? Well, they didn't really become the Jews at that time. That would come much later. They didn't have that focused cultural or ethnic identity yet. So when they leave Egypt, they take a bunch of, like Proto-Arabs, Proto-Jews, northern Berber Africans, more southern, sub-Saharan Africans, all kinds of different ethnic groups back with them, Ethiopians, people like that, to Canaan. And that's where the connection really begins, like historically. Now, don't get me wrong, it doesn't support the Exodus story in its truth. Like, it doesn't say, this is a true story as it's laid out in Exodus. Exodus is a retelling of that story through the lens of a theological polemic, in a way, in an effort to create a cultural identity. But it's drawing upon an oral tradition that had probably been passed on for several hundred years.
Yeah,
And
that
you
makes a
know
lot of
it's
sense to me. I want to get us back to values, just so that we.
Oh,
can,
right.
That's
My
what
bad.
I
But
have way
I would
more.
love to
way more
talk
on
to
there.
you
We're gonna
about
do a
that
whole
and see
episode
what
on
you
this.
think
We could
of
do it. I
my-
don't want to. We could do an
I just want
episode.
to say one thing.
All right, go ahead.
If this fascinates you, this portion of the discussion fascinates you, go to YouTube and type in Ethiopian 23andMe or any of these DNA companies that check your lineage, but look for Ethiopian people. Don't worry about other people right now. Just look at Ethiopian people. You will be stunned at how many of them, like, it says I'm 100% Middle Eastern. Now, we know the Arabs came down and invaded Ethiopia. So, yes, there's that component. But maybe they were Middle Eastern. They had Middle Eastern relatives before the Arabs ever showed up.
Sure, that is that's such a vague and that's such a vague and nebulous term.
Showed up.
And Middle Eastern is such a vague and nebulous term too.
Yeah. Also, it's just the history, right? Because we know people started in Africa, so they move out, they go all over the place. We're all one population, and then we start saying, "Oh, well, these people invaded these people and came there." None of these people ever. There was never a time where these people were like isolate, right? Do you see what I'm saying? Like we start together, and then we spread out, and then we start moving around and conquering and doing all this stuff. So yeah, we did have periods where we were isolated, but it's hard because even if you say, invade another country, you're invading a population where just because you went there to invade them doesn't mean previous populations didn't come there from the similar area or from your area during a different time, right?
Right. Well, and not only that, but I mean, a lot of people make this mistake too, and this will trip a lot of people up, is that when you get taught history, and I don't think it's anything like necessarily that the teachers do. I think that people just tend to draw this conclusion, and when it's been pointed out to me by other people, it bumfuzzles me. I'm like, why would you draw that conclusion? But when they talk about the Hellenization of the Mediterranean during the
Greek period,
during the classic period of antiquity, I think a lot of people, and they did set up a lot of colonies. Don't get me wrong; they really did colonize a lot of places around the Mediterranean. But genetically speaking, like their impact isn't like overwhelming, right? Like when you look at the fact that they had all these colonies all over Turkey and Canaan.
Well, a lot of that's deliberate too, right? It's like if you think about like white people conquering black people and bringing them back and making them their slaves. Well, part of that was you didn't interbreed with the slaves. Now, it happened, like a lot of people did, right? But I
think that kind of gets to my point. My point is, like,
I'm agreeing with you. For sure.
The leadership might have been Greek, for instance, right?
Right.
So on their artwork and in their paintings and on their coins, it looks like, oh, this is where Greek people live, right? But it turns out that when we look at the archaeology and the genetics and all this stuff, there'll be this small Greek enclave in this larger indigenous gene pool.
And some intermittent interbreeding.
Sprinkled throughout. But for the most part, if you were just kind of taking a flyover view of that area, nothing changed ethnographically speaking. Like the ruling elite changed, and they were a different ethnicity,
right?
The population at large didn't.
You see this now where maybe it's China or somebody that's going to sort of other developing nations and like building up their economies and building up their factories and stuff, but all of the jobs and the management and the leadership stay amongst the sort of Chinese elite, right? Not the locals. Right. And so
that would be a modern day. Yeah, modern day.
So you would start to see like a lot of the, if we look now, you'd start to see a lot of signs of their influence and dominance, but if you looked at the makeup of the population, it would still be primarily these the developing countries' initial population. They just have sort of imported management and stuff like that. All right,
and I'm sure they project a lot of their culture because of that too, right? Like if you're in a developing country and China puts in some roads and factories and other improvements and stuff, I'm sure they'll slap up a few posters, some propaganda posters and everything. The Chinese would, and I'm sure that would influence the culture around it. But it wouldn't change the population, and I think that's ultimately that's the strongest argument for if Jesus had been a real person, and if we're looking at the genetic and ethnographic makeup of ancient Palestine or ancient Israel, I think it would, for the most part, I think he'd just be a Jewish looking guy or Arabic or whatever,
I totally think
I remember now why I brought up I remember now why I brought up "Don't Mess with the Zohan" earlier, and then I got sidetracked for a second.
Yeah, I'm 100% on the. He was probably like just a regular. I think from what I saw of the expert's reconstruction, he literally just looked like a regular middle-aged kind of, Middle Eastern man. He literally looked like he could have played Saddam Hussein on TV, right? If he really. And
that was the funniest part about Don't Mess with the Zohan at the end when they're all standing. Have you guys seen that movie? It's really silly. Mm-mm. If you haven't, I highly recommend it.
I haven't. Let me hit this clip though, because I want to. We're not going to have a lot of time to talk about this. I just want to.
My bad.
No, it's not. We're not going to get too deep. I just want to see them introduce this conversation of value so that we can have this chat amongst ourselves real quick.
I guess the idea is basically about these love manifesting virtues. I've already mentioned them: forgiveness, courage, sacrifice. Something along those lines.
So that's a key phrase just to pin right there. Love manifesting virtues.
I think.
And wait, let's hear what they are again.
About these love manifesting virtues. I've already mentioned them: forgiveness, courage, sacrifice. So
forgiveness, courage, sacrifice.
No, I think it's right on one level that suffering can build virtue. I completely agree with that. And I think if everybody in the world had the kind of suffering that I've had, which has been hard at times, but if they've had the kind of suffering I've had, it has helped me become a better person in many ways. And so I agree with that. I don't think that it answers the question of why there's extreme suffering in the world, why there are so many children starving to death every minute, and why there's drought and earthquakes and hurricanes, a tsunami that kills 300 million people. And it's like 300,000 people overnight. It's like, what, what you can explain the kind of quotidian daily kinds of things that would be the hassles we go through, or even personal problems, divorces. But there's so many things you can't explain with that. And my problem with suffering is that, I came to a point where I just didn't believe there was a God who was active in the world, who was allowing this kind of the extreme suffering. I could understand it if it was not extreme suffering.
Well, I think that, I definitely agree that these virtues are.
All right, one thing I really love about this is that I feel like a lot of times these floofy discussions that Christians want to have are distractions. And I kind of wanted to contrast a little bit here, right? How when Cameron's amongst the brethren in a church and a presumably Christian audience filled with apologists, it's all, well, let's talk about the values of knowledge and love and truth. And, I really failed to live up to these simple, mandates of being a brother in my conversations, right? And then when he gets to Dr. Bart Ehrman, right, okay, here, let's talk about love. Let's talk about truth. Let's talk about knowledge. This is a very big thing that comes up. You know, the problem of evil. All right, Dr. Ehrman, let's get into the problem of evil. Well, how do you feel about the axiological issue of the love manifesting? What was the other one before the I can't even remember what it was the first time we paused it. Right? It just gets caught up.
The soul building theodicy.
The soul building theodicies. Perfect. See, that's what Deacon No Name coming through with.
What
the
was the other one? The one he
memory.
wanted to set aside. He brought up two, and then he immediately set aside the first one he brought up. Free will theodicy. Yeah, he goes, the free will theodicy and the soul building.
Right.
Now let's set the
Right.
free will theodicy. So why the fuck did you even bring it up in the first place? Sorry.
So, but it's like, what happened to just, you know, wanting to be in truth and listening and trying to get, it's just, you see
what changed?
You see the
What
night and
changed?
day. Go ahead, my one black friend.
I think Cameron is when he's on stage and he doesn't have a Bart Ehrman in front of him or beside him to talk to, his message has to be reaching those people who were where he was. The difference is when he's talking to Bart Ehrman, he may be trying to get to where Bart Ehrman is in terms of knowledge, because I think we can all agree, including Cameron, that Bart Ehrman knows far more about biblical history and theology than Cameron does currently. That could change in the future, but Cameron's current knowledge base is more than likely far less than what Ehrman knows. So I think that's why you're getting a different conversation here. And it may be that Cameron is legitimately not asking someone else's questions to Dr. Ehrman, but his own, because Cameron may have unresolved things. I think Ehrman's answer about maybe God not seeming so active in the world is fantastic. A tsunami that kills 300,000 people overnight. I believe it's in the Psalms or Proverbs where it talks about how God has set the boundary of the sea and it cannot overrun it. Well, the person who wrote that probably lived in a culture where they just never saw an instance of a tsunami. They never heard of such a thing. So for them, it's unconscionable that something like that could happen, and it could be so horrific.
And that's, I was just going to say that that's kind of where I was getting at with this, is that, and again, I do think just the basics is that he's in a total different context, total different situation. And I agree, he is probably asking his own questions. I just like to call attention to the difference, but I think he's not doing anything unreasonable, right? And having a totally different thing.
I think he's trying to, look impressive. I think it looks like he's trying to talk like an academic and sound like an academic, even though he's got a degree in basically voodoo, right? Like, I mean, would you take him more or less seriously if he was a doctor of divinity in voodoo?
Do you actually know what his education is? I actually don't know. It's kind of
I thought he had some like master's in divinity. It was some bullshit degree.
I don't
I looked him up one time.
Yeah, I'm trying to find him. One thing I've noticed is that I think he makes himself hard to find on like Wikipedia.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Like
I don't know a ton about it yet.
Well, I think the thing none of us ever want to do is talk over the heads of our listeners. This broadcast is designed to reach people.
Right.
And we want to reach people. We want to inform them. We want to hear from them like yourself, No Name. Please do chime in. We want to know what your opinions are, because when one person speaks up, really what they say is representative of thousands of more who stayed silent. So there's a value there. And if Cameron is brought in to give this speech to this congregation, the worst thing he can do is talk to three people.
Yeah. Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. No. And in that sense, I actually think, Yeah, I just
So
saw this. I'm
you're
laughing because
extending.
I just looked this up and I'm trying to find stuff about I'm telling. Look, just Google Cameron Bertuzzi real quick, and even you could even put in Cameron Bertuzzi Wikipedia. It's like it doesn't come up like most people because he has just so much other stuff out there. But so something that just keeps popping up is photography stuff, and it's a little weird. So when I saw Sandal's comment, that made me laugh. But my one black friend, what I was kind of saying is that he Bart Ehrman did a great job here of not going over the head of the audience, right? Cameron has talked about the, soul building theodicies and the axiology and the love making virtues or whatever. Whatever I but
can't get enough of your love, baby.
But what did Bart Ehrman do, right? He came right back with, well, for me, I see this, the disasters, and I see all these bad things happen. And I came to believe that there isn't a God who's interacting, right? Like, this is one of the times when, like, Bart Ehrman did some real academic, I've been around the block a time or two. I'm not going to get thrown by, because he wanted Bart Ehrman to go off on all these, right? He put all these little nuggets out there.
I see what you're saying. Because he chose his words, or used careful, precise language, he didn't leave a counter objection open for Cameron to latch on to. That's what they usually do. Like if you say, I don't see a God, right? When I look around and I see the world, you say, look at the trees and that's evidence for God. And I go, I just see trees. Right? Like that's I see trees. You're adding something on top of it. Right. So if I say, well, I don't see anything extra, that's being more precise, right? Like I don't see anything extra.
Also, I
don't see anything active.
A couple things. Number one, Bart Ehrman managed to be far more accessible in his response than Cameron was in the setup.
That's true.
But also think about how what most academics do, right? We just want to show you how much we know and how proud we are of our PhDs. So when you start dropping those buzzwords on us, they immediately bite on that. They immediately take the bait because they want to explain and clarify, all the big high-minded concepts.
That's funny. That's not that you're an academic. To me,
right.
Like you're an academic, and
I am by actual profession. Yeah.
Yeah, by profession. But you don't do that, right?
Deliberately. Yes.
Most of my experience with academics are that they actually tend to be pretty relatable. Mm-hmm. They tend to be pretty humble. They tend to
people
be,
with a job.
They tend to be pretty precise, huh?
Just normal people with a very particular job, right? So
I disagree. I don't think they're just normal people. I think they're better in a lot of ways. No. Seriously, because I spent a lot of time debating with fundies, both Christians and Muslims and Mormons and whatever, and flat earthers, and At the end of the day, I'm sorry, I'm trying to phrase this precisely. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yes, right. So there's this idea. Yeah, so I think in that regard, I see what you're saying. Like there's this idea that there's a lot of people who have overblown sense of their intelligence, and a lot of times they tend to be people of lower measurable intelligence or lower performance or whatever, whereas people who seem to be really, really smart tend to also be more humble about and precise about what they know and don't know. So I think that's happening. Also, I think something that's hard for people to understand is that there is a privilege in academia. So we say science is a privileged way of knowing. That doesn't necessarily mean that's a shortcut for saying scientists are smarter than other people. It's just to say that if the scientific method is followed, there are certain checks and balances and public corrections in place that help the field guide towards the truth reliably. So we say it's a privileged way of knowing compared to, that's what makes it different than religion, right? Religion doesn't have to go through peer review. You don't ever get retractions. You don't have to present data, right? And so having all of sort of the scientific method is what makes science a privileged way of knowing, right? And so that's, I think, what you mean when you say, like, people, they're better sources on a lot of these things because if they stick to the, rigors of the philosophy, then they can make, meaningful contributions that the rest of us can actually rely on and count and are useful versus, it not being that way.
No, I mean,
No.
sort of. I think where I was going is that so you've got on one end of the spectrum, you've got Dr. Ehrman, who is really knowledgeable about his field of his area of expertise, but he's not a theologian, right? So when he's talking about this or necessarily a philosopher, so when he's laying out his objections to to Christianity or God or whatever, they are the simple ones that Cameron had alluded to in his conversation with his brother. Right.
Yes.
And I guess where I'm going with that is, like, Dr. Ehrman doesn't try to, like, talk it up on those subjects, right? Like, that's not his field. That's not his area of expertise. These are just kind of like his objections that these problems that he's struggled with and has had for years. And it just basically caused him not to believe in God. And then the Christianity stuff is more to do with his expertise in, like, the field of literary criticism. And on that, like, he gets very precise. Like, his language is very precise about that. And he'll use very technical language because in that field, they use that technical language to discuss these things.
Yeah.
And so whereas Cameron uses a bunch of jargon, when all he has to do is say things like,
how can we have, love and sacrifice and courage without God or something? And that would be
something
like
to that effect. Yeah,
very
more,
direct
just a
way
simpler,
of asking the
just a
question.
simpler approach to the question, or a simpler approach to the subject. Since he knows he's not talking to a theologian, right?
Right.
Well,
Like, when you're talking to a layman, you don't start whipping out like a bunch of molecular evolutionary biology jargon.
Right. So this
I'm
was kind of my
sure.
point, right? So just quickly, I'll say this, that so that was kind of my thing, was that I think a lot of academics, especially in this type of setting where they're being presented as an expert and we're here to talk to the expert and we're going to, we're going to hear from the expert today. A lot of times they sort of, what I would do is I call it taking the bait, right? They threw out some jargon, and instead of you staying here, which is what you want to talk about, and making this point, in Armin's case, it's the clear, simple problem of evil. But Cameron throws out all these other things. And so what a lot of other academics would have done is said, well, here's how I feel about the theodicy. Well, first, for the benefit of our listeners, I should explain this theodicy, right? And so they'd spend 30 minutes defining the theodicies, giving us their nuanced take on the theodicies, explaining all the historians and giving us the citations of the theodicies, and then maybe jump into the same thing for the love-making virtues, blah, blah, blah. And it'd be 3 hours before Bart Ehrman looks into the camera and says, listen, I don't think God's real, and the problem of evil just boils down to there's too many bad things that happen for it to make any sense, right? And
I like the way Bart put it better. He didn't call it the problem of evil, right? He just said it was the problem of extreme suffering. Right?
Yeah. Like, I heard, like, there was a video once that I watched on animal suffering. I wish I could think of who wrote that video, and it blew my mind. It just totally, like, I hadn't really thought of animal suffering as a theological thing. I saw this video, it convinced me, it changed my mind, right? And I was like, man, that's a pretty interesting one. Go ahead, my one black friend.
If you are a Christian and you need a counter-apologetic to the problem of evil, you can cite Isaiah 45:7, where God says, I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. So there's your counter-apologetic.
I know, right? I am the author of both weal and woe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and I went through a period of Calvinism. I mean, I'm ashamed to admit it. I did, but I was a Calvinist for a couple of years, and that was basically my escape route. Was I would do that. I would point to Isaiah. I would point to passages in the Bible, and I take on the role sometimes. I put my Calvinist hat back on. I love it when Doug does that too. That's what really turned me on Doug's channel, is the way Pine Creek, where he'll put on his Calvinist hat. Y'all ever seen him do it? That's what I call it.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Where he'll take the role and pretend to be a Calvinist while talking to a Calvinist, kind of out Calvinist the Calvinist. And so, yeah, that it was, to me, it's an embracing of an evil God.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
I actually am really kind of motivated by Tux's whole thing of like, it's an evil, so evil. People think that it's good. Like the more I kind of meditate on that, it's been really moving me. So yeah, I think I just
explain
think
that to me a little bit. I must admit, I must have missed that with Tux.
He just talks about
evil,
this.
It's good.
Yeah, like a lot of, I gotta let him explain it because I'll probably do a bad job. But he just is motivated that, you know, that this thing is beyond our usual conception of evil. And part of the reason is because when you normally think of evil, it's easy to at least identify it as evil. Well, this thing is so evil because it's beyond, it has gone far beyond what, you know, anything we would normally conceive of as an ordinary evil has done in a negative way to the world. But beyond that, it's deluded all of its followers into thinking that it's actually good.
Oh yeah,
right?
That sounds like something Dr. Bob would say about, you know, Jehovah is basically a Lovecraftian eldritch horror. If you think about it.
Yeah. And when you start really thinking about it, man, it's like, man, that is what's happening, and it's scary. It's like the really scary part, right? It's like, it's just like I could tell you this, you know, one time I got arrested, right? And I've been arrested multiple times, right? Let's just put it that way. I've been arrested different places. Okay.
I've been in the clink twice.
And here's what I could tell you. Like, there's a certain level of professionalism and courtesy and friendliness that's necessary in these interactions. Like, you have to deal with the corrections officers and the officers of the court and the judge and the prosecutor, and all these people are going to have an impact on your life. And in your case, as a defendant, it's negative, right? Like, these are all the people. This is like the worst thing that's happened to you. It's really bad. And so you need to like get along with these people, right? And so they need to be professional, and they need to be courteous, and they need to not abuse their power, and like all of that's very important, right? But I'm gonna hit you with something that's really bad that follows up on what we're saying. The worst thing is when they're too nice. When they're too nice, it's just too much for you. And to be honest with you, if you're listening, people in the justice system, if you're listening, it's the best corrective technique ever. It is the best thing to keep people out of prison. I promise you. Because here's what happened. You're still aware of your situation, right? Like, you still know you've been locked up and this is bad. But there's a certain amount of hostility that you normally bring into these situations. And they violate that because they're so nice to you that you actually like them. And then you feel bad that you're putting them in this position. You don't want to be there anymore. You're like, look, being locked up sucks. And this cell is like the worst thing that ever happens to me, but I actually like the guy on the other, you know what I'm saying? And you're like, I can't do this. I just can't do this anymore. I gotta get out of here. I gotta get my life together.
You've never been arrested in Alabama.
No, see, I've never been. See, this is why so many people.
We have a much more attractive lockup system where you actively dislike the person who is locking you up. So it just keeps me coming back for more. I tell you what.
But this is kind of what it's like, right? Like the people
and those
that
those plain bologna sandwiches, and oh gosh, what else? The oatmeal and sausage patty breakfast with the stale toast. That was my personal favorite.
You understand it, right? It makes sense, right? I'm in a bad situation. You have to keep me here. My freedom's being restrained.
Yeah,
by
but you don't have to make it shitty. Like both times I was held were for bullshit, right? It was 24 hours. Well, yeah, 24 hours, both times. And I was freed. Like, charges were dropped. Everything was dismissed both times. But in the process, like, I was really put out. Now, I know this is going to sound very, like, Karen, white privilege-y of me or whatever. I don't give a fuck. I was charged with something. We, as a people in America, have this thing about innocent until proven guilty, right? So if I'm going to be put up for the night somewhere on suspicion of something while they try to figure out what they think they can charge me with, it shouldn't be in a fucking concrete cell with a concrete bench that's like 60 degrees. They take your fucking shoes away from you. And they feed you shitty food. And then they charge you money. They give you a fucking bill where I could have been like, I could have stayed at the goddamn like Galleria, up in the penthouse.
I've started to keep a list of future topics that we can do episodes on, and we'll do justice treatment of unconvicted people. That's
uncharged. Dude, there are people in our prison systems that haven't even been charged with shit, and the conditions are fucking awful. And we as a society go, well, if you're in jail, it's not supposed to be fun. Well, motherfucker, I'm not in jail. I'm just being held until they figure out if I'm even in trouble for anything, right? If they can even press charges on me. And then they go, oh, case dismissed or whatever. And it's like, well, I missed work. I had to pay a bunch of money, right, for the inconvenience of being in this really awful place for a night and being fed shitty food and treated like a bad person by the people that were holding me here. Yes. So, I mean, like, I personally have had two personal brushes were more than enough for me to convince me to live straight. But at the same time, I was still living straight, and it happened to me. It can happen to you.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's the problem. The problem is that it's one of those things where we talked about this before. My sin isn't as bad as yours, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of people really feel that because they've never been on the wrong side of the law, or their particular vices may be accepted, they have this sort of it'll never happen to me mentality. Yes. And so they don't realize all the ways that it can happen to quote unquote nice, normal, good people, which is most of us. So it's, you should realize that would kind of open your eyes to begin with. But it's like,
I'm just saying we live in a police state, and we're over policed, and our police in most major metropolitan areas can hold you for up to 48 hours without charges or anything. Yeah. And in that meantime, you are in a very uncomfortable, unpleasant set of circumstances that I think is abysmal and should be. I ain't saying put some motherfucker up at the Ritz or nothing. I'm just saying, like, go ahead. Yeah,
I have to. I live in a neighborhood filled with law enforcement people, and retired law enforcement too. And we sometimes get into discussions about reform. All of them, to the man or woman, all of them agree there needs to be some reform, some additional training. And in conversation with several of them, I bring up training the public, not just officers getting trained.
Yeah.
Public getting trained as well. There needs
Such
to
a
be
good point.
there needs
Such
to
a
be
good
an
point.
exchange. I'm not one of these. One of the things I wish Dusty would change his attitude on Cult of Dusty is he thinks all cops are bastards, which
No,
is
not
so
true.
far from the truth.
Yeah, I mean that's easy.
Yeah,
We
if
just
that
move
were
on
if
from
that were true, it would just be damn like a war in the streets right
Yeah,
now, right?
it's,
Like,
yeah, it's fine. We could just
But
move
look,
on from that. Go
they
ahead.
if that were true, they destroy each other.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's not what we see. That's not what we see. I think there in our society, yes, there is a need for some reform. And you know, those jails aren't hotels. They're not. The guy whose story you hear only part of while you're sitting there next to him, there may be things about that person that horrify you, but they're not telling you any of those things.
Right.
So you really, and maybe no one ever does, you really don't know the whole story about those people. What Pocketlocker mentioned about the kindness, I absolutely, that's my MO in this world. Kindness is the author of my life. I say it again and again. That's my way. That's my way.
He's the nice guy in our stable. You got me, No Name, and Tux, and my one black friend. I call us four horsemen of the atheist apocalypse. And every group has to have that one nice guy. That one guy that's way too nice.
The black sheep.
I'm going
the black
to tell
sheep
you
of
how
the
it is.
family.
And I'm happy to hear your side, whatever your journey has been. I'm happy to hear it. But we don't get anywhere sugarcoating things. I think those in law enforcement have a tough job because not everybody that they deal with is civil.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I should throw my own hat in the ring here. I live in Los Angeles, and I do a lot of traveling for work, but I live in Los Angeles. I've been at gunpoint by LA 4 times in my life. I've been at gunpoint.
By LAPD.
It was scary once. It was never scary after that. The other 3
Really? After the first time, you were like, "No, this is not a problem."
This is how it goes sometimes.
No, I'll tell you why, No Name. Because the first time I was offended, and the rest of the times I was offended. It was scary at first. I was not in the wrong. I didn't do anything wrong any of the 4 times. But
and they fucking pull guns on you?
I've had it happen to me. I've had it
You
happen to
do?
me. Yeah.
I'm not.
Damn. The only people I've ever had pull guns on me have been civilians.
Civilians? Well,
Yes.
I'm going to tell you, they have a tough job, right? I'm 5 foot. I was 5'10" then. I'm like 5'9 1/4 now, or something like that.
Shrinking.
200 plus pounds, and I guess I look like I can handle myself. I'm not a fighter by any stretch of the imagination, but whatever. They've seen people my build who are. They've seen people my build who come at them with utter viciousness. I'm just not that guy.
Right.
And I make sure the first time I sort of was sarcastic. I was not sort of sarcastic. I was utterly sarcastic. I had dinner with a friend. I was walking to another friend's house who lived around the corner from the restaurant. And I was stopped because they said someone fitting my description. I was walking, mind you. Someone fitting my description stole a car.
Yeah, but I got the same line.
I got my hands behind my head. I'm at gunpoint with 2 cops. And I literally said, then look for someone in a car, you idiot.
Right.
Wow.
I think that would be a pretty salient feature right there.
The way they looked at each other, they realized it was pure comedy. They realized, you know what? This wasn't our best choice to stop this guy.
Right.
And I went on to say, he's getting away. Because they had the helicopter out there, the whole 9 yards.
Damn.
These guys just happened to come around the corner where I was walking, minding my own business.
Right.
Now,
They thought
held me
you
at
were on some
gunpoint for
Grand
that.
Theft Auto. You like took the car, stole it, stashed it. Now you're walking to the safe house.
Yeah, it's now I'm like Sports Billy.
Literally,
Sports
that's what
Billy.
they. That was the theory
in
in
my
that
bag.
moment.
And I actually said when they asked me, like, what are you doing? And I'm like, why am I getting this question? And I said, I just had dinner with my friend Amanda at the restaurant down the street. It's called such and such, and their food is really good. I recommend the steak Diane. and they said, well, what's in this bag? And the guy starts going through my bag. I said, there's nothing in there but a bunch of screenplays.
I thought he was about to ask, what is Steak Diane?
No, what is Steak Diane? I don't even remember. I think it had.
No, I thought the cop was about to ask that. When you said that, I was going to laugh.
What up, Satan's Little Helper? I see you. Thanks for coming through, Satan's Little Helper.
Yeah, it's like
hey, Satan's Little Helper.
So, yeah, I just wanted to say the other time when I got in trouble with the cops like that, it was because I was sarcastic. I was trying to get to court and I was following a cop, asking to try to ask him for directions, and I pulled up next to him and I said, "Don't you know what it's like when someone's following you?" And he took off. I mean, that, I guess, yeah, and it was a whole ordeal. But yeah, it's just don't be sarcastic with the police if you're black, I guess, is the moral.
or if you look Jewish, because it turns out that when I wear a suit, I've been told that I look like a Jew lawyer. And so one night I got pulled over by this state trooper who was Mr. Aryan Nation 1935, right? Looked like the poster child for the Nazi party. He's built like a fucking linebacker, got this blonde crew cut, and he pulls me over. I was coming back from this I don't remember, it was some kind of meeting that I had to go to, that I had to dress up for. And anyway, it was February. It was cold. I was wearing a top coat. I thought I looked cool. It was this wool overcoat over my suit. And it had been raining, misting. I'd been behind this 18-wheeler. It was fishtailing in front of me, kicking up water like I'm driving through a damn car wash. So I give it some gas, get around the truck, slow back down. I get almost home and I get pulled over, and I'm curious as to why I got pulled over, because the whole time I'm driving home I'm doing the speed limit, and it turns out that he had clocked me about 7 miles back, where I had gunned it to get past the 18-wheeler. And so I briefly sped, but I thought I made a convincing case to him as to why. And there were no other vehicles on the road. I felt like I was actually doing the safer thing by passing the truck than by staying behind the truck.
Right.
He was not convinced by my case and had me get out of my car, frisked me, and then asked me, I was like, what did I do to piss this cat off, right? Like, it's cold, it's wet, it's raining. Nobody wants to be out in this nonsense. Let's just call it a night and go home. I'll take a warning, because the whole time I felt really weirded out by this experience, like really intimidated and threatened, right? So he frisks me. This is for you, Brody. Shout out to the fan. And he asked me if I'm carrying a weapon, and like a dumbass, my smart mouth said, "No, I'm not a criminal." Because I was a kid and I was dumb, and I had pretty much divided the world up into cops and robbers, apparently.
Right.
In that panicky moment, and I said, "No, I'm not a criminal."
I'm missing the essential equipment.
Yeah, he leans in and he goes, "Are you calling me a criminal?" And my brain it kept supplying me with these Terminator-like
lines. Like, they never get. Like, why do they never get? They're like, you know what this reminds me of? No, seriously, like, I teach at a university, right? That's part of the academic gig, right? And so every once in a while I have to remind myself of, like, the teacher-student dynamic, right? Because I just talk to my students like they're normal people. And every once in a while, I have to remember, like, oh, I grade them. Like, I evaluate their projects. So this is why, they're nervous and they're asking me all these questions. Like, I'll be sitting there looking at them sometimes like, what are you guys nervous about? Like, don't you know me? Like, you just have to go up. You have to give a presentation. You got to talk about your stuff. and you got to cover all the points I said in the thing, and you'll be fine. Like, what do you? And then I'm like, and I have to remind myself, like, they're college students. They have grades. They have exams. This is stressful to them. Like, even if you try to make yours as easy as possible, they don't know that until they take it.
There are stakes. There are stakes here.
Yeah, and you just gotta like remember. And then I go like, okay, and so I'll like break it down. Hey guys, this is what's gonna happen. Like I remember that they're being perfectly normal college students, but it's like cops never seem to get that the reason people act weird when you get pulled over is because, dude, I was just driving, doing my thing. You started flashing sirens behind me with the whole thing. I got pulled over on the middle of the highway with other traffic going by. Now you asking me these questions. I'm just
this is stressful.
It's a whole stress-inducing experience. Go ahead,
they know you're stressed out. They know.
They just don't care.
There's a psychological phenomenon. They'll
you will
if you'll notice.
Wait, hang on. Let him.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think there's some lag. Go ahead.
You'll have some that are on a power trip. That's not most of them.
Right.
That's not most of them. I'm telling you. Again, these are my friends and my neighbors.
Oh no, it's not them we're talking about. It's us. It's our.
But look, there are people who are going to think you're generalizing. They don't know that. They won't understand that from your specific examples, both of you, that you're referring to individuals that you met.
Yeah, of course.
Well, sure. From Tom Likas, you're broadcasting.
No, you're right. I mean, listen, I've had cops that have pulled me over for some minor traffic thing, and I'm bipolar. I sometimes take medication. Sometimes my hands shake, and they've kind of noticed, and they've been like, "Hey, are you okay? Is everything all right?" You know, and I'll be like, "No, I'm fine. Everything is fine." So that does happen. You know, I've had cops pull me over, and the car just reeks of weed, or I reek of weed, and they'll be like, "Hey," and I show them I got a medical marijuana card or whatever, and it's have a nice evening. So they're I think. And I've sat on the steering committee for police departments, and I've been involved in politics. So I've retired a dispatcher. My grandmother's a retired dispatcher. So I always had police over the house. I've had most of my interactions with the police have been positive. But it is kind of jokingly funny though that some of them really in these moments do seem to not take into consideration like the stage that they've just put you on and the pressure of the situation. And it's super unfortunately, especially then when they take that as either a sign of aggression or that you're hiding something or that you might be inebriated or, instead of, in those cases, those particular officers could benefit from some better training on, hey, people are really nervous when they get pulled over. Go ahead.
All right, a case from my neighbor. My neighbor works for a very large police department in a touristy area. He got a call to go try to rescue a baby, an infant that drowned in a pool. He was unable to revive the child. He then went back to I'm going to call it base, the department or whatever, after that call. They sent him right back out the door. So when you get that police officer that's on edge, maybe, or at least it feels that way, you have no idea what they were just exposed to. As I was taught in high school, they might have just come out of a warehouse shootout.
Sure, but I'm gonna hit you with the other side. As a black man in America, I don't care.
I understand.
You know what I mean? And I don't mean that in a way of like, if I was actually talking to your friend, I'd be like, no, that's terrible. But that's what I mean. But so when I say the police need better training, yeah, it's that cop, but it's also the department. It's the entire way we do the whole system. But that's their job. They're professionals. If somebody told me, oh, hey, like, when your teacher flips out at you, you should be sensitive. You don't know what happened to them. They may have just had an experiment go bad in the lab, or they may have just had a student curse them out because they didn't like a grade they were given, or, they may be under pressure for a grant from their dean, right? Most of my students would say, yeah, I get that, and I would have empathy for an individual who's having a rough day, but that's their job. And so between them and their higher ups, it's just when it comes to my interaction with an officer on the street, they have a job to do, and they need to be professional about that job. Now, I agree with you. If he just saw a baby die and he got sent back out into the field, he shouldn't have got sent back out into the field, but at no point should that become my problem, right?
That was not your friend's fault on any level, right? I disagree that they should have dispatched that to your neighbor.
Yes.
They should have dispatched that to an EMT.
And I agree with you to this extent. You should take this into consideration as an individual. I'm just being snarky, but you really should, because if you're a person and you find yourself in a position with a cop, remembering that can, one, help yourself through the situation. And it can also, in this day and age where these situations escalate to violence so quickly, right? It can have you sort of say, oh, maybe he's not being aggro towards me, right? And maybe this isn't about to be, something on the news. Maybe he just is any number of very legitimate challenges that come with his very difficult job that I would never want to deal with, he might be dealing with right now. And let me try to chill out and help us both get through this. I actually think that's tremendously valuable advice. It's the same thing like when you deal with a medical professional, right? Like, they make mistakes. Sometimes those mistakes might be you. And, when they come in the situation and you think, they're not at their best, right? They're another person who, they could have just been dealing, who knows what they were dealing with. So it is a totally valid consideration. It's just like, me, I've had a lot of traumatic experience with police officers. But at the same time, I agree with you, that's a stressful job. I was in a prosecutor's office, and, it was our job to try and sentence people and get them to enter into plea agreements. And it's so easy to fall into just this assumption that we're the big bad people that love to just throw people in jail, and you must love destroying the community with law enforcement as a prosecutor. And I was like, no, actually, myself included, and most of the prosecutors I know, what actually motivates a lot of those. There are your Giuliani's out there, right? He was a career prosecutor who brags about his man years. There was a certain culture of that in legal professionals, right? I've convicted people to 15,000 man years, right, of time. They take pride in that, right? And that just came out of a certain old school of, it showed that you were active and that you convicted serious criminals to serious sentences over a very serious long career. And so that was one way to summarize it. But a lot of contemporary prosecutors go into prosecuting because they feel like if they want the system to be changed, they got to participate in it themselves.
On the inside.
And they want to put themselves in the position where they can do more community-oriented justice, or they can make sure sentences aren't too harsh, or they can push for harm reduction measures. And people knew with me, like, that's what I was training for. I was motivated. Even Johnny Cochran, that's what his background was. That's why he was the right guy for the OJ case. That was why he brought out so many of the inadequacies of the system. He knew it. He used to work in it. That's how he knew all of those details. And like for me, like, being like a marijuana law reformer and things like that, I wanted to be able to put myself in a position where I could say it isn't in the interest of the city or it isn't in the interest of the state to pursue these cases, right? And the prosecutor typically has that kind of prosecutorial discretion, it's called, right? He can just say, I just don't think it's in our best interest to pursue this. But you have to be in that position to exercise that discretion. The same way you have to become a professor if you think teaching should be done differently, right? And so, yeah, and the same thing with policing, right? A lot of police are motivated by everything they see out in the world, and they want to be the difference-making police officer. And I think your neighbor probably fits into that group. And then a lot of people do. And then it's unfortunate that they're dealing with the system that is sending them back out the door after traumatic experiences, undertraining them in certain ways in certain departments for different things, which some of that boils down to not having enough in the budget or the budget going to the wrong things, right? There seems to be plenty enough. Some departments probably prioritize, ooh, look, we just got all this federal money. Let's grab us a tank and some more bulletproof vests. We could get some new cars. Trauma counseling, community sensitivity training. Nah, that's not so much fun. And so some of that, everybody's dealing with. Part of the thing that was motivating for me was like, in my time at Penn State, being a very, very active marijuana law reformer, I ended up working closely with the police department. And that was one of the things that struck me during that experience, was how hard their job was, how difficult it was. And I had conversations like this. Like, they used to do this thing where when we had big games, oh, by the way, No Name, appreciate you, brother. I heard that you say your StreamYard crashed. Thanks for coming through. But if it's okay, you can just hop back in. Let me push the link back up in case you need the information again.
I got to be going too.
Yeah, we're probably going to get out of here soon. But one of the things I was going to say is that what we ended up talking about was, I was like, well, why do you guys do this thing where we have a big game and you guys are like downtown with like the riot gear and the shields and you're dressed in all black and you got these task force, and it kind of sets up this us versus them, like, really like paramilitary type vibe, and I wasn't feeling it. So I had the opportunity to ask him about it, because we would meet one-on-one in his office over a cup of coffee or whatever. And he said, he said, I understand where you're coming from. He's like, for us, it's about, I've had the experience of having to call a loved one and talk about an injury that an officer sustained because somebody dropped something on their head out of an apartment window, right? So imagine the kids are partying, they throw stuff out the window, it falls, hits a cop in the head. Now you're the chief of police, you got to call that officer's family. Mm-hmm. Bro, you want to talk about my head exploding in real time, right? It was just like, holy crap. Yeah. Oh, it was, you know what I had in that moment? A realization that I was talking to the chief of police, right? Who has a lifetime of police work. He climbed through all the ranks and the whole hierarchy and worked on all the vice squad and this squad and that squad. Now he's the chief of police. He has chief of police responsibilities. And I want no parts of them, right? And so when I would do different things where like students could have dialogues with police officers and stuff like that, and he would always come himself. He was amazing. He was a good buddy of mine. He would even tell people, as me, say, I'm friends with Jay, and people would just be like, because he's like this big, 6 foot something white dude. He looked like he could just, beat up black dudes for fun. But he was, he could play that type of cop on TV, right? He had the look, right? But he wasn't that guy. He was great. And it was just really amazing in these conversations. I really learned so much from him, to your point about this just being a super stressful job, and some of the things you see that look like, ooh, I don't know why we're doing this, or it may look like intimidation, or they're primed for brutality. A lot of it is they've really got to protect themselves in these situations. And so it totally not just opened my mind, it changed the way I talk to students. It had a big influence on me. I was able to talk to students and say, hey, look, it's not just that the peace league ain't really out here to get us like that. I know it looks that way to us sometimes, but here's what's going on. The police chief broke it down for me, right? And when I would break that down for students, it opened their eyes, right? And so we were able to, I think, make progress in terms of, hey, I represent the community of marijuana people. They're offenders. They're having interactions with the police officers. Like it or love it, it's just the way it is right now. On the other side, you know, the police, even things like this, most of the police officers were former students. So when they had that, remember I talked about how it's not just my atheism versus your theism. The conversation changes when I say, I used to be a theist. I struggled with these things, and that was my motivation to search for the truth and find the change. Well, imagine when the police officer is sitting there talking to a stoner, right? And the police officer all of a sudden says, guys, I don't mind you guys partying. We like that you party. I used to be a student here. I used to party, right? I love this place. I'm a Penn State graduate. I want to keep this community safe. Total different ball game. Because now he just shifted from being an outside police officer that's making trouble for us to, man, I don't want to have a run-in with you because you're one of us. You're just a former student who grew up to be a cop that's here keeping us safe. You know what? Maybe I should smoke weed in my apartment, right? Maybe I shouldn't joyride as much, right? Because I will put the police in a bad situation, right? You start to think differently, right? Because I identify with him now. So I think this type of stuff changes the game. What's really interesting is that we're talking about our values, and we really didn't need a scripture. We didn't need God. I don't know. How can you have these values, my one black friend? Oh, you got one for us?
No, I had that one. So.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, just quickly, tell us about where you see values coming. How do you answer the axiological challenges in life, my one black friend? What is the ontology of your axiology?
Well, I think you have to, I'll explain. One of my favorite things that I learned in my life was how the Australian Aboriginals viewed time. They viewed, and I won't say all of them, some of them had the idea that every moment in time is occurring simultaneously.
Wow. Fantastic. That's really nice.
I don't think that's true, but what a concept. And I know in my own life, when I hear about a situation, I know the best thing for me to do often is not make up my mind right away unless that is what is needed. I have to address the moment, then I need to speak up. But as I mentioned, were the Hebrews of the Bible black people? I don't know. I've invested a lot of time into listening and hearing other people's opinions and their research, and I've read a small amount about it. But I haven't made up my mind. And like I said, it's easily over 300 hours. I still don't know.
Wow. Yeah. Right. Profound.
In weighing what is required of me, right? Or what I would hope others felt obligated to do or encouraged, probably a better word, encouraged to do in their life to make the right decisions as I have done, is look around and see how what you do will impact your own life and that of others. And if you can make positive choices, which generally you can, sometimes it's hard to do the right thing because you don't know what the right thing is.
Right.
Make the best choices. And if your choices are those kinds of choices that edify others, that strengthen others, I would encourage that too. A friend of mine had me talk to his son once, and because his son was having a rough time. And I said to his son, what you do matters. I feel that way about myself.
Yeah.
I feel that way about you. I feel that way about pretty much everyone. Knowing that what we do matters, choose carefully. choose decisions that are going to make the world a better place or you a better you. Decisions that don't take something away from somebody that they actually need, be it an opportunity or otherwise. I think by trying to hold another individual or a group of individuals down, you screw up the whole system in ways that you fail to imagine. So I'm one of those people. I try to, if you will, keep the conversation going. Have an open mind about things. People with other opinions, especially because I have learned a lot from people with other opinions. And I've certainly changed quite a few.
Yeah, and I think that's really great. I agree with all that. And I would say for me, a lot of this stuff, I don't even really find that interesting philosophically, because I think we overcomplicate things. So I think that's interesting at the level of interesting conversation, but it's not interesting to the level of something that needs to be seriously pondered, because you won't have a coherent worldview if you can't answer these questions for yourself, right? I think it's more like, if you want to hear what different people have to say about it, go ahead. For me, values don't even require, and I know this maybe not be something that everyone agrees with, but thinking about it from an evolutionary perspective, this stuff all dates pre-humans. I just think anytime you start to live in sufficiently large groups, what we call like eusocial groups, or, seriously just massive populations within your species. And then there's subdivision of that population into different groups and competing groups and all this type of stuff. You sort of get this emergence, right? Like, I know you see this stuff in birds, you see it throughout primates, you see it, you sort of see it all throughout the animal kingdom in these type of species, where they will punish people who steal things. They will punish cheaters. They will punish people who murder other members of the population unjustly. They seem to coordinate this amongst themselves. They seem to be able to say, oh, like, you just did something wrong. We all chirp at each other. We just had a little chirpy trial. You've been convicted. Then they all peck the offending bird to death, and then they all fly off, right? It's like they just tried this person, convicted them, and, elephants have funerary rituals so I think these values are just a natural thing for you to survive in a highly social species. There would be no such thing as large-brained primates if they had never figured out that you can't just go around killing each other, and you can't let people who haven't contributed to securing the harvest eat all the food. You can't tolerate bandits within your people. You can't tolerate people who will steal all our stuff when we're asleep at night, because then we can't get rest we need without you see what I'm saying? And so you start to rotate and have a person stay up and watch them. And then if somebody violates it, they report it, and we beat that person up, and everybody knows you shouldn't do that. So I sometimes think we overcomplicate things, and that's what I mean. We want to see them as uniquely human things. I think the uniquely human thing is that we have a verbal language where we have orally focused discussions, and we use sound to transmit particular content. And I don't even think that's unique to humans. I just think it's the only language we understand. So we're like, we're so cool because we have words for these things. Birds would be like, we're so cool because we got little chirpy, click, click sounds for these things, and we don't even need words. Words take too long. So they've got a whole thing. They don't even need books. They're just like chirpy, execute the thing, fly off, right? They're just good like that. They're like, what are y'all writing books about, right? Sometimes I think even that, we worship too much. Books are like some of our grandest things. Thinking about it from a real evolutionary perspective, it proves that we're not created. Because why would you create a species that needed a book to transmit ideas? Think about taking 500 pages to transfer an idea. That's got to be like the least efficient way to do it. It should be like, boom, and then I just transferred it, and you would know exactly what I meant. Like I would have just transferred like thousands of years worth of knowledge and history. I would just be like, and you'd be like, oh yeah, I get it, right? Go ahead.
You remind me of a story I once wrote. There's a book in the story called The Book of Magic. And the Book of Magic, if you're lucky enough to ever hold it, it's very thin. It's like it's 2 covers and 1 page with a sentence on it. So you read this sentence. If you don't understand it, another page appears. So you turn the page. The same sentence is on the next page. If you don't get it, another page appears and you turn that. And this happens 3 or 4 times. And then the book becomes very thick. Because if you can't grasp the simple concept, then the long explanation is what you require.
Right.
And once you, the little boy in the story actually puts in the time to read the entire thing, only to realize it goes back to the simple sentence that he first read and didn't get.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's great story writing. That's a great story. That's a great story. And I really, yeah. So that's great. That's kind of my take on it. Folks, this has been a super fun episode. We went longer than usual, but that's because the conversation just kept going off into very, very interesting directions. Hey, it's Hot Program. That's what we do around here. Just a quick reminder, other content. I did Late Night Counter-Apologetics. That's over on the Jay Bundy channel. Link should be in the description. But if you want to take and grab a look at that, we talked about people who went from porn stars to pastors, or from pastors to porn stars. I also had a sort of one-on-one showdown with Cameron Bertuzzi. So if you want to see that, go and check that out. And introduced the scripture from the Gospel of Myron. So we're actually getting into the scriptures about the cult of the flying man. So check that out there. We also, at 10 o'clock tonight, I'll be doing chapter 3 of God is Not Great by Christopher Hitchens. And then you can catch me throughout the week on my Twitch or the Pocketlocker 86 YouTube channel for my live streams. All these links should be down in the descriptions. But the main thing you want to do is join the Discord, because that's how you get to follow up on the atheist content and stay with us as we go bar hopping and hop from stream to stream throughout the week. And then, of course, join us here at 3:30 every Sunday for Hot Program, which will probably be your favorite show because all the other stuff is wackadoo and probably won't make any sense if you enjoy Hot Program. So, but appreciate you guys so much. We'll be back next week. I want to quickly thank the people who came through the chat: No Name, Sandals, Brody, Satan's Little Helper. Our community is small but growing. We really appreciate your participation. And if you watch this later, please do like the video, share it with others, subscribe to the channel, and let us know what you think down in the comments. We've had so many different directions. Give us some feedback on what you'd like to hear in future episodes. Give us some feedback on this episode. Tell us about your axiology. Tell us about your values, where they come from, how you would try to explain them to Cameron Bertuzzi, or how you might try to have that conversation with Dr. Ehrman. Let us know if you want us to do more Dr. Ehrman. I know Dr. Ehrman triggers a lot of atheists, so I'd be happy to get into more of that. Thank you guys so much. As always, be good to yourselves.
And each other.
All right. And we are out of here. See you next time.
See you next time. Thank you.